One click, one text message. A billionaire woman reappears in his life, this time not on a lavish dance floor, but in a humble little bookstore. Adrian Cross, a quiet single father in Eugene, Oregon, never imagined that a wedding dance would lead him to the brink of destiny. But when Celeste Arden, powerful, arrogant, and desperately lonely, finds him again, he must confront an undeniable truth. Sometimes love doesn't come from your world, but from where you least expect it. Follow this story to the end. Like and comment the city you're viewing so I know how far my story has come. But thus, Adrian Cross had perfected the art of becoming invisible. Not in any dramatic sense. No trauma, no tragic backstory. Just the slow, grinding erosion that comes from years of getting through the day instead of living it. At 32, he had a daughter he loved fiercely, a job that paid the bills without inspiring anything beyond mild resentment, and a life carefully constructed to require as little risk as possible. He moved through his routines like a man following a script he'd memorized too well, and somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten how to improvise. The wedding invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, wedged between a credit card offer and a reminder that his car registration was due. Jason Matthews. High school friend. Still close enough to warrant an invitation, distant enough that Adrian hadn't seen him in nearly 5 years. The thick cardstock felt expensive between his fingers, embossed lettering catching the light. He'd almost declined. Weddings meant crowds, small talk, explanations about why he was still single, still renting, still stuck in the same tech support position he'd taken when Emma was born. But Jason had called him personally, voice warm and insistent. "Come on, man, it's been too long. Bring Emma if you want. Hell, bring a date. Just show up." Adrian didn't have a date. Emma was with her mother that weekend. Their custody arrangement meant he had her Wednesday through Sunday, which made spontaneous social events both rare and weirdly liberating when they did occur. So he'd said yes, mostly because saying no would have required more explanation than acceptance. Now, standing in the hotel ballroom wearing a suit he'd bought for a funeral 2 years ago, Adrian was regretting that decision. The space was beautiful in that generic, expensive way. White flowers everywhere, soft lighting, round tables draped in ivory linen, guests clustered in small groups, champagne glasses catching the glow of too many candles. Adrian recognized maybe a dozen faces from high school, all of them grown into versions of themselves he didn't quite recognize. Sarah Chen, who used to organize environmental protests, now worked in corporate law. Mike Rodriguez, former class clown, had become an orthodontist with a receding hairline and a serious expression. Everyone seemed settled, successful, sure of themselves. Adrian felt like he was watching it all through glass. He'd made it through the ceremony without incident, found a seat in the back, smiled at appropriate moments, clapped when the couple kissed. Jason looked happy, genuinely, uncomplicated happy, in a way Adrian envied without resentment. His bride was lovely, beaming, surrounded by bridesmaids in dusty rose dresses that probably cost more than Adrian's rent. The reception was harder. Too many people, too much noise, too many questions he didn't want to answer. He'd positioned himself near the bar, nursing a whiskey he didn't particularly want, calculating how long he needed to stay before leaving wouldn't seem rude. Adrian Cross? He turned, already assembling his polite stranger smile, and forgot what he was going to say. The woman standing beside him was stunning in a way that made the words seem insufficient. Tall, maybe 5'9", without the heels that brought her nearly to his eye level. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have belonged to someone in a painting. Sharp cheekbones, full mouth, eyes so dark they looked almost black in the dim lighting. She wore a dress the color of deep forest green, elegant and simple, that somehow made every other woman in the room look overdressed. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped him. It was the way she was looking at him, direct, curious, like she'd been searching for him specifically. "Yes," he managed. "I'm sorry. We haven't met." Her voice was low, warm, faintly amused. "Celeste Arden. I'm a friend of the bride's family." She extended her hand. Adrian shook it, aware that his palm was slightly damp, that her grip was firm and confident, that he was staring and needed to stop. "Adrian," he said, then realized she'd already known that. "Cross. But yes, you said that." Her mouth curved. "I did." "Right. He cleared his throat, desperately trying to remember how normal human conversation worked. Are you... How do you know Sarah's family? Business connection through my father, originally, but Sarah and I stayed in touch after he retired. We're not close, but close enough for wedding invitations. She tilted her head slightly. You're friends with the groom? High school, Adrian said. We haven't seen each other much since graduation, but Jason's one of those people who stays in touch even when you're terrible at it. And are you? Terrible at staying in touch? Spectacularly. The word came out before he could stop it. Too honest, too immediate. He felt heat climb his neck. I mean, I'm not great with people, generally, these days. Celeste's expression shifted into something he couldn't quite read. Not pity, he would have retreated immediately if it had been pity, but something softer. Understanding, maybe. These events are exhausting, she said quietly. Everyone performing the best version of themselves. All that effort to seem effortlessly happy. Adrian laughed before he could stop himself. Yes, exactly that. Exactly. She smiled, and it transformed her face completely. Not the polished, practiced smile she'd worn when approaching him, but something genuine and warm that reached her eyes. Would you like to dance? She asked. The question landed like a stone in still water. Adrian's first instinct was to refuse. He didn't dance, hadn't danced in years, had never been particularly good at it even when he tried. But something about the way she asked, casual and direct without any of the game playing he'd expected from someone who looked like her, made him hesitate. I should warn you, he said slowly. I'm not good at it. Neither am I. She was lying. He could tell somehow, but the lie felt kind. Come on, the music's decent, and standing here making small talk with strangers is slowly killing my soul. Adrian set his drink on the bar and followed her onto the dance floor. The band was playing something slow and jazzy, saxophone weaving through the melody. Couples swayed together in the soft light, close and comfortable. Celeste moved into his space with an ease that should have been intimidating, but somehow wasn't. She placed one hand on his shoulder, took his hand with the other, and suddenly they were dancing. Relax, she murmured. You're holding yourself like you're expecting an attack. Sorry. Adrian tried to loosen his shoulders, feeling clumsy and obvious. I told you I'm not good at this. You're fine. Her hand was warm on his shoulder, steady and sure. Just move with me. Don't overthink it. So he tried not to. Tried to focus on the music instead of his feet, on the way she guided him so subtly he almost didn't notice until they were already turning. She smelled faintly of jasmine and something else, something expensive and clean. Up close, he could see a small scar near her left eyebrow, a tiny imperfection that made her seem suddenly, startlingly human. So what do you do, Adrian Cross, she asked, when you're not avoiding wedding receptions? I work in tech support. The words came out flat, apologetic. For a software company. Mostly I help people who've forgotten their passwords or can't figure out how to update their browsers. That sounds incredibly frustrating. It is. He appreciated that she didn't try to make it sound noble or important. But it's stable, flexible hours. Good for a single parent. Her eyes flickered with interest. You have a kid? Daughter, Emma, she's 7. That's a good age. It is. Adrian felt himself relaxing slightly, the conversation settling into something easier. She's with her mom this weekend, which is why I could come to this. Usually I'm doing homework and watching the same 3 Disney movies on infinite loop. Celeste laughed, and the sound was surprisingly genuine. What's the current favorite? Moana, for the 3rd consecutive month. Could be worse. At least the music's good. They turned again, Adrian following her lead without thinking about it now. The song shifted into something slightly faster, but they kept the same rhythm, neither of them seeming inclined to pull apart. What about you? Adrian asked. What do you do when you're not attending weddings for family business connections? Something changed in her expression, a brief shadow crossing her face before the practiced composure returned. I run a company. Well, several companies, technically. Investment firm, mostly. Some real estate. It's boring. The way she said it told him it wasn't boring at all, that she was downplaying deliberately, but Adrian didn't push. Instead, he said, that doesn't sound boring, stressful maybe, but not boring. Both, she admitted. Definitely both. The song was ending. Around them, couples were beginning to separate, drifting back to their tables or toward the bar. Adrian knew he should let go, step back, thank her politely, and return to his safe corner of the room. But Celeste's hand remained on his shoulder, her fingers warm against his palm, and neither of them moved. "Want to get some air?" she asked quietly. Adrian nodded, not trusting his voice. They slipped through the crowd, Celeste navigating the room with practiced ease. She led him through a side door he hadn't noticed, down a short hallway, and out onto a stone terrace overlooking the hotel gardens. The night air was cool and sharp after the warmth of the ballroom, carrying the scent of roses and cut grass. Celeste leaned against the railing, tilting her head back slightly to look at the stars. Adrian stood beside her, maintaining a careful distance, still not quite believing this was happening. "Better," she said after a moment. "Much." They stood in comfortable silence, the muted sounds of the reception drifting through the closed doors behind them. Adrian could hear laughter, the band starting a new song, the clink of glasses being refilled. "I lied earlier," Celeste said suddenly. Adrian glanced at her. "About what?" "Being a terrible dancer. I'm actually quite good." He smiled despite himself. "I figured." "You didn't seem like you'd believe me if I told you the truth." She turned to look at him directly. "That I saw you standing alone at the bar and wanted an excuse to talk to you." Adrian's breath caught. "Why?" "Because you looked like the only real person in that entire room." Celeste's voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Everyone else was performing, networking, playing whatever game they thought they were supposed to play. But you looked like you were just trying to survive it, and I thought, maybe he's as tired of this as I am. Adrian didn't know what to say to that. The honesty of it felt dangerous, too much too soon, but also exactly right in a way he couldn't explain. "I am tired," he admitted. "I've been tired for a really long time." "Me too." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Adrian wasn't sure he understood. Celeste turned back to the gardens, her profile sharp against the soft darkness. "What are you tired of?" he asked. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Being what everyone expects. Being the brilliant Celeste Arden, CEO, billionaire, woman who has it all figured out." Her voice carried a bitterness he hadn't heard before. "People see the money, the success, the power. They see what I've built, but they never see me. The actual person underneath all of it. And after a while, you start to wonder if that person even exists anymore." Adrian understood that more than she could know. The slow disappearance of yourself into the roles you played. Father, employee, responsible adult. Until those labels were all that remained, and the person you'd been before them became someone you barely remembered. "I know what you mean," he said quietly. "I became a dad at 25. Emma's mom and it didn't work out. We were too young, too unprepared, too everything. But Emma needed me to get my shit together, so I did. I found a stable job, got an apartment, set up a routine that worked, and somewhere in there, I forgot who I was supposed to be when I wasn't being her father." "Do you regret it? Emma?" "Never." The answer was immediate, absolute. But the rest of it, sometimes I wonder who I would have been if things had gone differently. If I'd finished college, traveled, taken risks, lived a bigger life instead of a smaller, safer one. Celeste nodded slowly. "I took all the risks, built the empire, became exactly who I said I would be, and now I'm trapped in it. Every decision I make affects hundreds of people. Every relationship I have is complicated by what I own, what I'm worth, what I can do for someone's career or portfolio. There's no way to just be normal, to be wanted for myself instead of what I represent." Adrian turned to face her fully. In the dim light from the garden lamps, she looked younger somehow, less polished and perfect. More real. "I don't know what you're worth," he said. "I don't know anything about your companies or your empire. All I know is that you made a boring wedding reception bearable, and you're the first person I've talked to in months who didn't make me feel like I was fading into the background." Something shifted in her expression, surprise maybe, or something deeper. She reached out and touched his arm, her fingers light against his sleeve. "What's your last name again?" she asked softly. "Cross. Adrian Cross." "Adrian Cross," she repeated, like she was committing it to memory. "I'm glad I asked you to dance." "Me too." The door behind them opened, spilling light and noise onto the terrace. A couple stumbled out, laughing, wrapped around each other. They stopped short when they saw Adrian and Celeste, muttered apologies, and retreated back inside. The interruption broke whatever spell had been building between them. Celeste stepped back slightly, smoothing her dress, reassembling that polished composure. "I should get back," she said. "I'm supposed to give a toast in 20 minutes. Family obligation." "Of course." Adrian tried not to let his disappointment show. "Thank you for the dance. And the conversation. Can I—" She hesitated, and for the first time since they'd met, she looked uncertain. "Could I have your number? I know this is probably strange, and you have every reason to say no, but I'd like to talk to you again, if you're open to that." Adrian's heart was suddenly loud in his ears. "Yes, absolutely yes." They exchanged phones, fingers fumbling slightly as they entered their information. When Celeste handed his phone back, her contact was listed simply as Celeste. No last name, as if she'd deliberately left part of herself undefined. "I'll text you," she said. "I'll respond." She smiled, that genuine smile that transformed her face, and then she was gone, disappearing back into the bright warmth of the reception. Adrian stood alone on the terrace for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. His phone felt heavy in his pocket, charged with possibility. Part of him wanted to leave immediately, to preserve this moment before reality could complicate it. But another part, the part that had been dormant for too long, wanted to stay, to see if she'd look for him again before the night ended. He went back inside. The reception had shifted into full celebration mode. The band was louder now, guests more animated, inhibitions lowered by champagne and sentiment. Adrian found Jason near the cake table, surrounded by old friends, flushed and happy. "Adrian!" Jason grabbed him in a one-armed hug, whiskey sloshing in his other hand. "I saw you dancing with Celeste Arden. How the hell did you manage that?" "She asked me," Adrian said, still not quite believing it himself. "She asked you?" Jason laughed, not unkindly. "Man, do you know who she is?" "She mentioned running some companies." "Some companies?" Jason shook his head in amused disbelief. "Adrian, she's a billionaire, literally. Her investment firm manages something like $8 billion in assets. She's been on magazine covers. She gave a TED Talk about female entrepreneurship that went viral. And she asked you to dance." Adrian felt the ground shift slightly beneath him. "Oh. Yeah, oh." Jason clapped him on the shoulder. "Good for you, man. She's brilliant. Intimidating as hell, but brilliant." Adrian's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, heart jumping, but it was just a notification about his car insurance. Not Celeste? Too soon to be Celeste. "I should probably head out soon," Adrian said. "Early morning with Emma tomorrow." That was a lie. He didn't have Emma until Wednesday, but Jason was drunk enough not to question it. They said their goodbyes, Adrian promising to stay in better touch, both of them knowing he probably wouldn't. Adrian made his way toward the exit, scanning the crowd one more time for dark hair and a green dress. He spotted her near the front of the room, champagne glass raised, mid-toast. Her voice carried across the space, confident and warm, saying something charming about love and partnership that made everyone laugh. She looked completely in her element, polished and powerful and utterly unreachable. Their eyes met across the room for just a moment. She smiled, small, private, meant only for him, and Adrian felt that connection pull tight between them again, undeniable and terrifying. Then he left. The drive home felt surreal. Eugene at midnight was quiet, streets empty except for the occasional car or late-night wanderer. Adrian's apartment was dark when he arrived, silent in that specific way places are when you live alone more often than not. He dropped his keys on the counter, loosened his tie, and stood in his small kitchen trying to make sense of the evening. His phone sat on the counter, screen dark and ordinary. She wouldn't actually text. Why would she? She was Celeste Arden, billionaire, brilliant, successful beyond anything Adrian could imagine. And he was, what? A 32-year-old tech support worker with a decent kid and a deeply ordinary life. Whatever moment they'd shared on that terrace had been just that, a moment. A brief, pleasant conversation between strangers at a wedding. Nothing more. Adrian made himself a cup of tea he didn't drink and went to bed. 3 days passed. Adrian returned to his routine with the kind of relief that comes from returning to something familiar after a brief disruption. Work was work. Password resets, software updates, The same patient explanations repeated to different confused users. Emma came back on Wednesday, chattering about her weekend with her mother, showing him drawings she'd made of their cat, Mr. Whiskers, who looked more like a purple blob than any actual feline. He told himself he'd imagined the intensity of that conversation with Celeste, that he'd built it up into something it wasn't because he'd been lonely and she'd been beautiful and weddings made people sentimental, that she'd probably forgotten about him the moment she'd driven away in whatever expensive car someone like her undoubtedly owned. Thursday evening, his phone buzzed while he was reading Emma a bedtime story. Unknown number. Hi. It's Celeste. From the wedding. I know it's been a few days. Work has been insane. I wanted to make sure I didn't dream that conversation we had. Adrian's heart stopped, then started again too fast. Emma tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, you stopped reading. Sorry, baby. He kissed her forehead, forcing himself to focus on the illustrated knights and dragons in her book. Just got a message. Let me finish this chapter. He read through to the end on autopilot, his mind entirely on the phone lying face down on Emma's nightstand. When she finally drifted off, thumb in her mouth despite being too old for it, Adrian carefully extracted himself from her bed and retreated to the living room. He stared at the message for a full minute before responding. You didn't dream it, though I've been wondering if I did. The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared almost immediately. That would make us both delusional, unless we shared the same delusion, which seems statistically unlikely. Adrian smiled despite himself. Are you always this analytical? Occupational hazard. Numbers and probabilities make more sense than people most of the time. Except when they don't. Except when they don't, she agreed. They texted back and forth for an hour, conversation flowing easily from the wedding to work, to books, to the strange isolation of being awake while the rest of the world slept. Celeste was funny in a dry, sharp way that caught Adrian off guard. She told him about a disastrous board meeting where her CFO had accidentally shared his screen during a presentation, revealing he'd been shopping for a very specific type of adult costume. Adrian told her about the user who'd called tech support convinced her computer was possessed because it kept auto-correcting regards to retards. That's not possession, Celeste wrote. That's just Microsoft being chaos incarnate. I told her to try Google Docs. She said Google was watching her. I mean, they probably are, but not because she's special. Adrian laughed out loud, then quickly muted his phone when he remembered Emma was sleeping. I should let you go, Celeste wrote around 11. This was nice, though, talking to someone who doesn't want anything from me. What makes you think I don't want anything? The message sent before Adrian could second-guess it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Do you? Adrian thought about lying, about being safe and vague and keeping this at a comfortable distance. Instead, he wrote, I want to talk to you again. Beyond that, I'm not sure yet. Honest, I like that. It's usually gotten me in trouble. With who? Everyone. Not with me, Celeste wrote. Talk soon? Yes. Adrian went to bed feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. Not dread of the next day's obligations, not exhaustion from the day just ended, but actual excitement for what might come next. They texted every day after that. Not constantly, both of them had lives that required attention, but regularly enough that Adrian found himself checking his phone more often, hoping for that small buzz of a new message. Celeste would send him random observations from her day. The ridiculous jargon people used in business meetings, the coffee shop near her office that couldn't seem to spell anyone's name correctly, her assistant's ongoing war with the building's thermostat settings. Adrian responded with stories from tech support, Emma's latest pronouncements about the injustice of bedtimes, the way Mr. Whiskers had somehow gotten stuck in a cardboard box for the 3rd time that week. It felt safe, this slow building of understanding through screens and distance. Adrian could be honest without being seen, vulnerable without being exposed. And Celeste, he was learning that beneath the polished exterior she showed the world, she was just as uncertain as he was, just as tired of performing, just as hungry for something real. Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after the wedding, Celeste called instead of texting. Adrian was at work, surrounded by the low hum of his co-workers' conversations, but he stepped into the stairwell for privacy. Hi, he said, and heard how his voice had gone slightly rough. Hi. Celeste sounded different on the phone, less guarded, more immediate. Is this a bad time? No, just working, but it's fine. I had a thought. She paused, and Adrian could almost see her gathering courage. There's a bookstore in Eugene, Cornerstone Books. Do you know it? On Willamette? Yeah, I take Emma there sometimes. I'm going to be in town tomorrow, just for the day. Would you want to meet there? In person, I mean. Actually see each other instead of just texting. Adrian's pulse kicked up. Yes. What time? 3. I know it's Saturday and you have Emma. She'll be with her mom until Sunday night. 3 works. Okay. Celeste let out a breath. Okay, I'll see you then. Celeste? Yeah? I'm glad you called. Me too. The next 24 hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Adrian tried to distract himself with errands and cleaning and a movie he didn't really watch. He changed his shirt 3 times Saturday afternoon before forcing himself to stop. This wasn't a date. This was just 2 people who'd had a conversation at a wedding meeting for coffee and conversation. Normal, casual, nothing to be nervous about. He arrived at Cornerstone Books 15 minutes early and made himself wait outside until exactly 3 o'clock. The bookstore was a local institution, cramped and crowded, with narrow aisles and books stacked on every available surface. It smelled like old paper and coffee, warm and familiar. Celeste was already there when he walked in. She stood near the fiction section, looking somehow both completely out of place and perfectly at home. She wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of the elegant dress from the wedding, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Without the formal styling, she looked younger, more approachable, more beautiful. She saw him and smiled, and Adrian felt something settle in his chest. "Hi," she said when he reached her. "Hi." They stood there, suddenly awkward, the easy flow of their text conversations replaced by the complicated reality of being in the same physical space. Adrian noticed small details he'd missed at the wedding, the way she twisted her watch when she was nervous, the faint freckles across her nose, the small chip in her front tooth that made her smile slightly imperfect. "Want to grab coffee?" Celeste asked, gesturing toward the small cafe in the back corner. They ordered, cappuccino for her, black coffee for him, and found a table tucked away from the main flow of customers. The afternoon light filtered through the dusty windows, making everything feel slightly golden and unreal. "So," Celeste said, wrapping her hands around her cup. "This is weird, right?" Adrian laughed. "Extremely weird. I don't normally do this. Ask strangers to meet me in bookstores after 2 weeks of texting. I don't normally say yes. Why did you?" The question was direct, curious, without any hint of game playing. Adrian considered lying, then remembered she'd told him honesty didn't scare her. "Because you make me feel like I'm visible again, like I exist beyond just being Emma's dad or the guy who fixes computer problems. And I've been invisible for a really long time." Celeste's eyes softened. "I know that feeling. Do you?" Adrian leaned forward slightly. "Because from the outside, it seems like you're the most visible person in any room. Magazine covers, TED Talks. Jason said you're kind of famous. Famous for what I've accomplished, not for who I am." She set her cup down carefully. People see Celeste Arden, CEO. They see the success, the money, the image I've spent 15 years building, but they don't see me, the person who still gets anxious before presentations, who sometimes eats dinner alone in her office because going home to an empty apartment is too depressing, who's tired of every relationship feeling like a transaction. What kind of transaction? The kind where they want access to my world, my connections, my resources, where I'm valuable because of what I can do for them, not because of who I am to them. Her voice was quiet, but intense. I've had relationships where I couldn't tell if they actually wanted me or just the lifestyle I represented, and after a while it became easier to just stay alone than keep trying to figure it out. Adrian understood that fear viscerally. The fear of being wanted for the wrong reasons, or not being wanted enough to make the risk worthwhile. "I'm not going to pretend I understand your world," he said. "I don't. But I know what it's like to feel reduced to a role instead of being seen as a whole person. To have people treat you as a function they need instead of someone they value." "Exactly." Celeste's expression was almost grateful. "That's exactly it." They talked for 2 hours, conversation winding through childhood and ambition and failure and hope. Celeste told him about building her company from nothing, about the ruthlessness required to succeed in a male-dominated industry, about the way success had made her harder than she'd intended to become. Adrian told her about Emma's mother, about the pregnancy that had derailed both their lives, about the guilt of resenting the limitations parenthood imposed even while loving his daughter fiercely. The bookstore around them gradually emptied as afternoon shifted toward evening. Other customers came and went, browsing and chatting and leaving with bags of books. But Adrian and Celeste remained in their corner table, the rest of the world fading into background noise. "Can I ask you something?" Celeste said eventually. "Anything." "What do you want?" "From your life, I mean. If you could have anything." Adrian thought about it, really thought about it, instead of giving the automatic answer about wanting Emma to be happy and healthy. "I want to feel like I matter," he said slowly. "Not just as a father or an employee, but as myself. I want to do work that means something beyond fixing other people's mistakes. I want to take up space in the world instead of just trying to stay out of everyone's way. And I want—" He stopped, suddenly aware of how honest he was being. "What?" Celeste prompted gently. "I want someone to choose me. Not because I'm convenient or safe or good enough, but because they actually want me. The whole messy, imperfect reality of who I am." The words hung between them, vulnerable and exposed. Adrian braced for her to pull back, to offer some platitude about how he'd find that someday. Instead, Celeste reached across the table and took his hand. "I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met," she said quietly. Adrian looked down at their joined hands. Her fingers were cool and steady against his skin. "I'm not brave. I'm terrified most of the time. That's what makes it brave." They sat like that for a long moment, neither of them moving, both of them aware that something was shifting between them, something that couldn't be unshifted. "I should go," Celeste said finally, though she didn't pull her hand away. "I have dinner with a potential investor at 7. Saturday night business dinner. That sounds awful." "It is," she smiled ruefully, "but unavoidable." They stood, still holding hands, navigating the awkward transition from sitting to standing without letting go. Outside the bookstore, the street was quieter, the evening settling in cool and gentle. "Can I see you again?" Adrian asked, then immediately wished he'd phrased it less desperately. But Celeste just squeezed his hand. "I was hoping you'd ask." "When?" "I don't know. My schedule is insane for the next couple weeks, but I'll text you. We'll figure it out." "Okay." They stood on the sidewalk, neither quite ready to leave. Celeste stepped closer, and for one heart-stopping moment, Adrian thought she might kiss him. Instead, she pressed her forehead briefly against his shoulder, a gesture so simple and intimate it stole his breath. "Don't disappear on me, Adrian Cross," she murmured. "I won't if you won't." She pulled back, met his eyes one more time, and then turned and walked to a sleek black car parked down the street. Adrian watched until she drove away, feeling like something fundamental had just rearranged itself in his chest. His phone buzzed 5 minutes later as he was walking back to his own car. "Thank you for today, for being exactly who you are." Adrian leaned against his car in the fading light and let himself smile. "Thank you for seeing it." That night, after Emma called to tell him about her day in that enthusiastic, scattered way 7-year-olds have, after he'd cleaned his apartment and made himself dinner and tried to focus on a book he couldn't concentrate on, Adrian allowed himself to acknowledge the truth he'd been avoiding. He was falling for Celeste Arden. Not the billionaire CEO, not the magazine cover success story, but the woman who admitted to being lonely and scared and tired of performing. The woman who'd asked him what he wanted and listened like his answer actually mattered. The woman who'd chosen honesty over polish and made him feel, for the first time in years, like he was worth choosing. It was terrifying. It was probably going to end badly. Their lives were too different, their worlds too far apart. But as Adrian lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his phone on the nightstand with Celeste's last message still glowing on the screen, he couldn't bring himself to care about the logical impossibility of it. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Adrian Cross felt alive. And whatever happened next, whatever complications or heartbreak or impossible logistics lay ahead, he wanted to feel this for as long as he possibly could. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a strange rhythm of anticipation and frustration. Celeste texted when she could, late at night after marathon board meetings, early mornings before flights to San Francisco or Seattle, stolen moments between conference calls that ran hours past schedule. Their conversations remained intimate despite the distance, but Adrian could feel the strain of her world pulling her in 1,000 directions that had nothing to do with him. He tried not to let it bother him, tried to focus on Emma, on work, on the ordinary demands of his life. But every time his phone stayed silent for more than a day, he felt that old familiar hollowness creeping back in, the sense that he'd imagined the whole thing. On a Thursday afternoon, while walking Emma home from school, his phone finally buzzed with something more than a quick text. "Hold on, baby," he said, pausing on the sidewalk while Emma examined a particularly interesting stick she'd found. "I know I've been terrible about staying in touch. I hate that I keep saying I'll call and then don't. This isn't what I want." Adrian's chest tightened. Here it comes, he thought. The gentle letdown. The acknowledgement that whatever this was couldn't survive the reality of their different lives. "What do you want?" he typed back. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "To see you. Actually spend time with you instead of just promising I will." "Are you free Saturday night?" Adrian's schedule flashed through his mind. Emma would be with her mother from Friday evening through Sunday. He had no plans beyond the usual lonely weekend routine of takeout and Netflix. "Yes." "Can you come to Portland? I have a thing I can't get out of, but after, we could have dinner, talk. I'll drive you back to Eugene if it gets too late." Portland was 90 minutes away. Adrian hadn't been there in over a year, not since Emma's mother had moved back to Eugene and made the trip unnecessary. "What kind of thing?" "Charity gala." "Very boring. Very corporate. But one of my major investors is being honored and I need to show face." Adrian tried to picture it, the kind of event where tickets probably cost more than his monthly rent, where everyone wore designer clothes and discussed stock portfolios over champagne. He'd be so far out of his depth he'd drown before appetizers. "I don't think I'm gala material," he wrote. "Neither am I, honestly. But I go anyway and pretend to care about networking. I meant, I don't have anything to wear to something like that." The response came quickly. "You don't have to come to the gala. Just meet me after. 8:30, 9 at the latest. There's a restaurant near the venue. Quiet, no crowd. We can finally have an actual conversation that lasts longer than 20 minutes. Adrian looked down at Emma, who was now trying to balance the stick on her head while walking in a straight line. She was completely absorbed in her task, tongue poking out in concentration, oblivious to her father's internal crisis. "Okay," he typed. "Text me the address. Thank you." A pause, then, "I really want to see you, Adrian. Me too." Saturday arrived with the kind of clear autumn weather that made Oregon feel like someone's idealized version of what a place should be. Adrian dropped Emma off at her mother's house Friday evening, ignoring the slightly judgmental look Karen gave him when he mentioned he had plans in Portland the next night. "Plans?" she repeated like the word was suspicious. "With who?" "A friend." "Since when do you have friends in Portland?" "Since recently." Adrian kissed Emma goodbye, told her to be good, and left before Karen could interrogate him further. He spent Saturday morning anxious and distracted, trying on different combinations of clothes like a teenager before prom. Nothing looked right. Everything felt wrong. Finally, he settled on dark jeans, a button-down shirt that wasn't too formal but wasn't too casual, and the one decent jacket he owned that didn't make him look like he was going to a funeral. The drive to Portland felt longer than usual, traffic thick with weekend wanderers and early dinner crowds. Adrian's hands were sweaty on the steering wheel. He kept the radio off, needing the silence to manage the anxiety thrumming through his chest. The restaurant Celeste had chosen was in the Pearl District, tucked between an art gallery and an expensive-looking boutique. Small, intimate, the kind of place that probably required reservations weeks in advance. Adrian parked 2 blocks away and walked, grateful for the cool evening air against his flushed face. He was 20 minutes early. He made himself wait outside, pacing the block, checking his phone every 30 seconds for a message that didn't come. At 8:40, a black car pulled up to the curb and Celeste stepped out. Adrian's breath caught. She wore a floor-length dress in deep midnight blue, elegant and simple. Her hair swept up in some complicated arrangement that probably had a name he didn't know. She looked stunning and untouchable, and nothing like the woman in jeans who'd met him at the bookstore. Then she saw him, and her whole face changed. The polished mask dropped away, replaced by genuine relief and something that looked almost like joy. You came, she said, walking toward him quickly despite the heels. I said I would. I know, but I was worried you'd change your mind, that you'd realize this whole thing is insane and I'm asking too much. Are you asking too much? Celeste stopped in front of him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the tiredness around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Probably. Yes. I don't know. Adrian reached out and took her hand, the gesture feeling both natural and terrifying. Hi. Hi. She squeezed his fingers. Sorry I'm late. The speeches ran long and I couldn't leave without looking rude. How was it? Excruciating. 2 hours of watching rich people congratulate themselves for donating a fraction of what they spend on vacation homes. She paused. That sounded bitter. It sounded honest. Same thing sometimes. Celeste glanced down at their joined hands, then back at his face. I'm really glad you're here. Me too. They went inside. The restaurant was exactly what Adrian had expected. Dim lighting, exposed brick, small tables with flickering candles. The kind of place where every dish came with a foam or a reduction or some other culinary term that meant expensive. But the hostess greeted Celeste warmly, led them to a corner booth that offered privacy, and left them with menus that didn't list prices. Order anything, Celeste said, reading his hesitation. It's on me. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. Let me do this. Adrian nodded, studying the menu without really seeing it. Everything sounded elaborate and foreign. Finally, he just ordered the first thing that seemed recognizable. Steak, medium rare, with whatever sides the kitchen recommended. Celeste ordered some kind of fish he'd never heard of, then requested a bottle of wine that the server seemed impressed by. When they were alone again, she kicked off her heels under the table and let out a long breath. Better? Adrian asked. Much. These things are gorgeous, but they're torture devices. She leaned back against the leather booth, looking more relaxed than she had outside. Tell me about your week. I want to hear about normal things. Work drama. Emma's latest pronouncements. Anything that isn't quarterly projections or investor relations. So Adrian told her about the user who'd somehow installed the same software update 17 times and couldn't understand why their computer was running slowly. About Emma's declaration that she wanted to be a paleontologist, astronaut, veterinarian when she grew up, and could she please have a dinosaur as a practice pet? About Mr. Whiskers getting stuck in the bathroom sink and requiring extraction by someone from the apartment maintenance team. Celeste laughed, really laughed, head back, eyes bright, and Adrian felt something warm settle in his chest. Your life sounds chaotic, she said. It is, but it's manageable chaos. Predictable, mostly. I miss predictable. Celeste's expression shifted into something more serious. My life is scheduled down to 15-minute increments, but nothing about it feels predictable. Every day is just putting out fires and making decisions that affect hundreds of people and trying not to collapse from exhaustion. Why do you do it? Because I'm good at it. Because I built something real from nothing, and walking away would feel like failure. She paused. Because I don't know who I'd be if I wasn't this. Adrian understood that fear intimately, the terror of discovering that if you removed all the roles and responsibilities, there might be nothing left underneath. You'd be you, he said quietly, the person who exists beyond the job title. Would I? I've been Celeste Arden, CEO, for so long, I'm not sure that person exists anymore. She does. I've talked to her. Celeste met his eyes across the table. Have you? Yeah, late at night, when you text me about terrible business jargon or your assistant's thermostat war, when you admitted you eat dinner alone in your office because going home feels too sad, when you told me you're tired of being valued for what you can do instead of who you are. Adrian leaned forward slightly. That's not the CEO talking. That's you. The wine arrived, interrupting the moment. The server poured carefully, asked if they wanted to taste it, seemed mildly offended when Celeste waved him away without the usual ritual. When he left, she raised her glass. To honest conversations with people who don't want anything from me except my company. Adrian clinked his glass against hers. I might want slightly more than that. Oh? Her eyebrow arched, amused and interested. Your company, your honesty. Maybe the occasional dinner that doesn't involve me cooking pasta for a 7-year-old. That sounds reasonable. They drank. The wine was good. Adrian could tell that much even though he knew nothing about wine beyond red versus white. Smooth and rich, and probably cost more per bottle than he spent on groceries in a month. "Can I ask you something?" Celeste said after a moment. "Always." "What did your ex say when you told her you were coming to Portland tonight?" Adrian shifted uncomfortably. "She doesn't know the details, just that I had plans." "Does she know about me?" "There's nothing to know yet, is there?" The question hung between them, weighted and difficult. Celeste set her glass down carefully, her fingers tracing the stem. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know what this is or what I'm doing. All I know is that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that wedding, that talking to you is the best part of most days, that sitting here with you feels more real than anything else in my life right now." Adrian's heart was suddenly very loud. "I feel the same way. But I'm terrified this is going to end badly. That our lives are too different. That you're going to realize I'm just some guy with a regular job and a regular life, and whatever you think you see in me isn't actually there." "Adrian?" Celeste reached across the table and took his hand again. "I don't want some polished, successful version of you. I want exactly who you are. The guy who makes me laugh with stories about users installing updates 17 times, who admits when he's scared instead of pretending to be confident, who loves his daughter enough to give up his own dreams, but is honest enough to admit it cost him something. That's a lot of faith to put in someone you barely know. Maybe. Or maybe when you spend years around people who perform every interaction, you get good at recognizing the rare person who doesn't." Their food arrived, beautifully plated and probably delicious, but Adrian barely tasted it. He was too aware of Celeste across from him, of the way candlelight caught in her eyes, of how every time their hands brushed while reaching for wine or water, electricity seemed to arc between them. They talked through dinner, about childhood and family, about mistakes and regrets, about the small moments that had shaped them into who they'd become. Celeste told him about her father, a businessman who'd taught her everything about building empires but nothing about being happy. About her mother, who'd died when Celeste was 16 and left a hole no amount of success could fill. About the loneliness of being the only woman in most rooms, having to be twice as smart and work 3 times as hard just to be taken seriously. Adrian told her about his own parents, still married and living in Ohio, confused by his choices but supportive in their distant way. About Karen, Emma's mother, and the relationship that had fallen apart under the weight of responsibility neither of them had been ready for. About the dreams he'd had at 22, backpacking through Europe, maybe writing something meaningful, living a bigger life than the one he'd ended up with. "Do you resent Emma?" Celeste asked carefully. "No, never." The answer was immediate and absolute. "But I resent the circumstances that made me choose between being her father and being myself. I resent that I had to become smaller to be what she needed." "You're not small, Adrian." "I feel small most days." "Then you're not looking at yourself clearly." Celeste's voice was firm. "You're raising a child, holding down a job, showing up for people even when it's hard. That's not small. That's just quiet. There's a difference." Adrian didn't know what to say to that. The words settled into him, pressing against all the places where he'd learned to expect criticism or disappointment. The server cleared their plates and asked about dessert. They declined. Celeste paid with a credit card that looked like it was made of actual metal, waving away Adrian's attempt to contribute. "Next time," she said. "Will there be a next time?" "I hope so." She stood, gathering her clutch and wrap, slipping her feet back into those torture device heels. "Walk with me? There's a park nearby. I'm not ready for this to end yet." Outside, the evening had turned cooler, the streets quieter now that dinner crowds had dispersed. Celeste led them 2 blocks south to a small park Adrian hadn't noticed before, just a square of grass and trees and benches, unremarkable except for the fountain in the center, water catching the streetlight in silver arcs. They sat on a bench facing the fountain. Celeste shivered slightly, and Adrian shrugged off his jacket without thinking, draping it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she murmured, pulling it tighter. "You're welcome." They sat in silence for a while, the fountain providing gentle background noise. Adrian was intensely aware of how close they were, their thighs almost touching, the warmth of her body bleeding through the small space between them. "I'm scared," Celeste said finally. "Of what?" "This. You. How much I already care about someone I've known for less than a month. She turned to look at him, and in the dim park lighting, she looked young and uncertain. I don't do this, Adrian. I don't let people in. I don't make myself vulnerable, but with you, I can't seem to help it. I scare you? The way you make me feel scares me. Like maybe I've been living half a life and didn't realize it until you showed me what the full version could look like. Adrian understood that completely. The terrifying recognition that what you'd accepted as enough might actually be nowhere near it. I'm scared too, he admitted. I'm scared I'm going to disappoint you, that you're going to realize I'm not interesting or ambitious or successful enough, that this feeling won't survive the reality of my actual life. Your actual life is what I like about you. Now. But what about in a month, 3 months? When the novelty of slumming it with a regular guy wears off? Celeste flinched like he'd slapped her. Is that really what you think? That you're some kind of novelty to me? I don't know what to think. Adrian's voice came out rougher than he intended. You're a billionaire, Celeste. You run companies. You're on magazine covers. And I'm a tech support guy who lives in a one-bedroom apartment and drives a car with 160,000 miles on it. What am I supposed to think when someone like you is interested in someone like me? You're supposed to think that maybe money and success don't mean shit when it comes to actually connecting with another human being. Celeste stood abruptly, Adrian's jacket slipping from her shoulders. You're supposed to think that I wouldn't be here, freezing in a park at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, if you were just some novelty. Adrian stood too, facing her. Then what am I? I don't know yet. That's what scares me. Her voice cracked slightly. I don't know what this is or where it's going or how to make it work when our lives are so different. All I know is that I think about you constantly, that I rearranged my entire schedule to be here tonight, that sitting in that restaurant with you felt like the first real thing I've done in months. They stood there breathing hard, the fountain filling the silence between them. Adrian could see the tension in Celeste's shoulders, the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. I'm sorry, he said quietly. That was unfair. It was honest. I told you I like honest. Even when it's mean, especially then. Celeste stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I don't want you to perform for me, Adrian. I don't want you to be polite or careful or say what you think I want to hear. I get enough of that from everyone else in my life. What do you want from me? The truth. Always. Even when it's hard. She reached up and touched his face, her palm cool against his cheek. Can you do that? Adrian's breath caught. Her hand on his skin felt like a brand, impossible to ignore. Yes. Then hear this truth. I don't care that you're not a CEO or a millionaire or whatever other bullshit marker of success people use to measure worth. I care that you make me laugh, that you listen when I talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. That you're honest about your fears instead of pretending you don't have any. Her thumb brushed his cheekbone. I care that when I'm with you, I don't have to be Celeste Arden, billionaire genius. I can just be Celeste, and I haven't felt that way with anyone in years. Mom, Adrian couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except feel the weight of her words settling into him. I'm going to kiss you now, Celeste said softly. Unless you tell me not to. Don't stop, Adrian managed. She smiled, that genuine smile that transformed her whole face, and then she was kissing him. It was nothing like Adrian had imagined, not tentative or careful, but immediate and certain, like she'd been thinking about this as much as he had. Her lips were soft and sure against his, her hand sliding from his cheek to the back of his neck, pulling him closer. Adrian's hands found her waist, the silk of her dress smooth under his palms, and he kissed her back with all the want he'd been trying to ignore for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Celeste rested her forehead against his. Worth the wait, she murmured. Adrian laughed shakily. Yeah, definitely worth the wait. They stood there, wrapped around each other in the middle of the park, neither willing to let go. Adrian could feel Celeste's heartbeat against his chest, quick and strong, could smell her perfume mixed with the scent of her skin, could feel the way she fit against him like she'd been designed specifically for this purpose. I should probably take you home, Celeste said eventually, though she made no move to step back. Probably. Or you could come back to my place, just to talk. I don't want you to think I'm assuming... Celeste, She stopped, looking up at him. I'd like to come back to your place. To talk. Or not talk. Whatever happens. Relief flooded her expression. Okay, good, yes. They walked back to where her car was parked, hands linked, neither speaking much. The driver who'd been waiting looked entirely unsurprised to see Adrian, simply opened the back door and waited for them to slide inside. Celeste's apartment was in a high-rise overlooking the river, all glass and steel and probably costing more per month than Adrian made in a year. The doorman greeted her by name. The elevator required a key card to access the top floors. Adrian tried not to feel overwhelmed by the sheer wealth on display, focusing instead on Celeste's hand still warm in his. Inside, the apartment was surprisingly understated. Modern furniture, yes, and art that was probably expensive, but also books stacked on every surface, a laptop open on the coffee table, a blanket thrown haphazardly over the couch. It looked lived in, human. Wine? Coffee? Water? Celeste asked, suddenly nervous again. Water's good. She disappeared into the kitchen, giving Adrian a moment to absorb his surroundings. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city lights reflecting on the dark water below. The space was open and airy, but somehow not cold. Personal touches softened the edges. A framed photo of a woman who must be Celeste's mother, a collection of vintage cameras on a shelf, a ridiculous number of coffee mugs clustered near the sink. Celeste returned with 2 glasses of water, having kicked off her heels and let her hair down. Without the formal styling, she looked softer, more like the woman he'd texted late at night, less like the CEO from magazine covers. Sorry, she said, gesturing at the apartment. I know it's a lot. It's beautiful, very you. You don't know me well enough to know what's very me. I'm learning. They settled on the couch, closer than strictly necessary, facing each other. Celeste tucked her feet under her, one hand absently playing with the hem of her dress. What happens now? Adrian asked. I don't know. What do you want to happen? Honestly, I want to keep seeing you, talking to you, figuring out what this is without overthinking it into nothing. That sounds reasonable, but I also need to know this is real for you, that I'm not just… He struggled to find the right words. That when the novelty wears off, you're not going to disappear. Celeste was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful and deliberate. I can't promise I won't disappoint you, or that this will be easy. My life is complicated and demanding, and most relationships can't survive the constant travel and late nights and public scrutiny. She reached out and took his hand. But I can promise that you're not a novelty to me, that this feels more important than anything else I'm doing right now, that I'll try to make this work if you're willing to try with me. I'm willing. Even knowing it might fail spectacularly, even knowing that. Celeste smiled, sad and hopeful at once. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. She laughed, and the sound filled the space between them with something lighter. Come here. Adrian shifted closer, and Celeste leaned into him, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder like it belonged there. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling the tension drain from her body. This is nice, she murmured against his shirt. Yeah. They sat like that for a long time, not talking, just existing together in the quiet apartment with the city spreading out below them. Adrian felt Celeste's breathing slow and deepen, her weight growing heavier against him. You're falling asleep, he said softly. Long day, long week, long month. You want me to go? No. Her arm tightened around his waist. Stay, please. Okay. I mean for the night, not… I just mean sleep here, with me, in the literal, non-euphemistic sense. Adrian smiled against her hair. I got that. Okay, good, because I'm too tired to be smooth about this. Celeste led him to her bedroom, another beautiful space with impossible views and a bed that looked like it cost more than Adrian's car. She lent him a t-shirt that was probably expensive despite being just a t-shirt and disappeared into the bathroom to change. When she emerged in sleep shorts and an old college sweatshirt, hair tied back and face scrubbed clean of makeup, Adrian felt something shift in his chest. This was Celeste without any of the polish, vulnerable and real and somehow even more beautiful than the woman in the midnight blue gown. They climbed into bed from opposite sides, the space between them both intimate and terrifying. Celeste reached out, her fingers finding his in the darkness. "Thank you for being here," she whispered. "Thank you for asking me to stay." "Adrian?" "Yeah? I really like you, in case that wasn't clear." He squeezed her hand. "It was clear. I really like you too." They fell asleep like that, hands linked in the darkness. Two people from completely different worlds choosing to bridge the distance between them. Adrian woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. For a moment, he was completely disoriented. The bed too comfortable, the room too bright, the ceiling too high. Then memory returned in a rush, and he sat up too quickly, looking around the empty bedroom. Celeste appeared in the doorway holding two mugs, already dressed in yoga pants and a tank top, hair wet from a shower. "Morning," she said, offering him one of the mugs. "Hope you like it black. I don't keep milk in the house." "Black's perfect." Adrian took the coffee gratefully, using the moment to collect himself. "What time is it?" 8:30. I let you sleep. You looked peaceful." "I should probably get going. Emma's back with me at 6 tonight, and I need to clean the apartment before—" "Adrian!" Celeste sat on the edge of the bed, close enough to touch. "Breathe. You don't have to run away." "I'm not running away. I'm just— This is a lot. Being here, waking up in your bed, all of it. I know, for me too." They sat in silence for a moment, sipping coffee, adjusting to the morning after awkwardness without the usual context of sex to navigate through. "Can I make you breakfast?" Celeste asked finally. "You cook?" "I can scramble eggs without burning them, which is my single culinary achievement. The bar is low, but I meet it consistently." Adrian found himself smiling. "Scrambled eggs sound great." They ate at her kitchen island, sitting side by side on expensive bar stools, and it felt surprisingly normal, comfortable even. Celeste was funny in the morning, self-deprecating about her complete inability to cook anything more complex than toast. Adrian told her about Emma's insistence on breakfast for dinner, leading to them eating pancakes at 6 p.m. while watching nature documentaries about deep-sea creatures. "That sounds perfect," Celeste said wistfully. "It's chaos. Emma asks approximately 800 questions per episode, and I know the answer to maybe 3 of them. Still sounds better than eating takeout alone while reviewing quarterly reports." Adrian looked at her, really looked at her. This brilliant, powerful woman who seemed genuinely envious of his chaotic weeknight dinners with a 7-year-old. "You could come over sometime," he said before he could talk himself out of it. "Meet Emma. Eat pancakes at inappropriate hours. Pretend to know things about anglerfish." Celeste's expression shifted into something vulnerable. "You'd want that? Me meeting your daughter?" "Eventually, yeah. Not right away. Emma's been through enough disruption with her mom and me splitting up. But if this is going somewhere, then yes, I'd want you to know her. And if she doesn't like me, then we have a problem, because Emma's opinion is the only one that matters more than my own." "That's fair?" Celeste set down her fork. "For what it's worth, I'm terrified of meeting her." "Why?" "Because kids see through bullshit. I can't perform my way through a 7-year-old's judgment." "Good thing I'm not asking you to perform then." They cleaned up together, moving around each other in the kitchen with surprising ease. When it was time for Adrian to leave, they stood by the door, neither quite ready for the goodbye. "I'll text you," Celeste said. "You better. And we'll figure out when we can see each other again, properly. Not just stolen hours between everything else." "I'd like that." Celeste kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Adrian let himself believe just for a moment that this impossible thing between them might actually work. The drive back to Eugene felt different than the drive up had. Lighter, somehow, full of possibility instead of dread. Adrian's phone buzzed halfway home with a message from Celeste. "Already miss you." "Is that pathetic?" He pulled over to respond. "Only if it's pathetic that I feel the same way." "Guess we're both pathetic then." "Guess so." Adrian merged back onto the highway, smiling at nothing, and let himself hope. The hope lasted exactly 4 days. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because reality had a way of grinding down optimism into something more manageable. Celeste's schedule exploded with back-to-back meetings in 3 different cities. Adrian's routine absorbed him back into its familiar rhythm. Work, Emma's homework battles, the endless cycle of laundry and grocery shopping, and making sure his daughter ate at least 1 vegetable per day. Their texts became shorter, less frequent, punctuated by longer silences that neither of them acknowledged. By Thursday, Adrian was starting to wonder if Portland had been some kind of beautiful anomaly. A perfect night that existed outside the bounds of their actual lives, impossible to recreate or sustain. Then Celeste called at 11 p.m., her voice tight with exhaustion. "I'm sorry I've been terrible at staying in touch." Adrian was already in bed, but he sat up, suddenly alert. "You don't have to apologize." "Yes, I do. I said I'd try, and then I immediately disappeared into work for a week. You're running multiple companies. I get it. Don't let me off the hook that easily." She sounded frustrated, maybe with herself. "I hate that this keeps happening, that I keep meaning to call and then it's midnight and I'm too exhausted to form coherent sentences." "You're forming them pretty well right now. That's generous." A pause, the sound of her moving, maybe settling into a chair or bed. "Tell me something good. Something from your world that isn't quarterly earnings or investor presentations." Adrian thought about it. Emma lost her first tooth today. She was terrified there'd be blood, but then it just popped out while she was eating an apple, and she was so excited she made me take 17 pictures of the gap in her smile. Celeste laughed, and the sound was warm enough that Adrian could almost feel it. 17 exactly? I counted. She has very specific documentation requirements. What does the tooth fairy pay these days? $5, apparently, according to Emma's extensive research polling her classmates. Inflation's hit everything. Celeste's voice softened. That sounds like a good day. It was. What about you? Anything good happened this week? Silence stretched long enough that Adrian thought she might have fallen asleep. Then, I hired a new CFO, someone who actually gets the direction I'm trying to take things, instead of just pushing for maximum short-term profit. It doesn't sound like much, but it feels like maybe I can start building something sustainable instead of just lucrative. That sounds important. It is. Or it could be. I don't know yet. She exhaled slowly. I miss you. I know that's ridiculous given how little time we've actually spent together, but I do. Adrian's chest tightened. I miss you too. When can I see you again? Whenever you want. My schedule's pretty flexible. Don't do that. Do what? Pretend your time doesn't matter, that you're just available whenever I happen to have a free moment. Celeste's voice carried an edge now. You have a life, Adrian, a job, and a daughter, and responsibilities. I don't want you to treat those like they're less important than accommodating me. I wasn't, you were, and I appreciate it, but I also need you to be honest about what works for you. This only functions if we're both actually showing up, not just you rearranging everything to fit into the gaps in my calendar. Adrian was quiet, absorbing that. She was right. He had been defaulting to accommodation, assuming his schedule was infinitely more flexible than hers simply because it involved less money and fewer employees. Okay, he said finally. Then honestly, weekends work best when I don't have Emma. I can sometimes do weeknight evenings after she's in bed, but that's tight. And I can't do anything that requires me to be in Portland overnight unless I have at least a few days' notice to arrange childcare. Thank you. That's helpful. He could hear the approval in her voice. I'm in San Francisco next week, but the week after I'm relatively local. Could you do dinner? Not Portland this time. Maybe halfway. There's a place in Salem I've been meaning to try. Salem works. When? Friday the 18th, around 7? Adrian mentally checked his custody calendar. Emma would be with Karen that weekend. That works. Good. A pause. Adrian? Yeah? I'm trying. I know it doesn't always look like it, but I am. I know, so am I. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing in particular, the mundane details that made up actual lives. Eventually, Celeste's words started slurring together with fatigue, and Adrian told her to get some sleep. Will you text me tomorrow? She asked, sounding younger and more uncertain than usual. If you want me to. I do. I like seeing your messages even when I can't respond right away. Then I'll text you. Good night, Adrian. Night, Celeste. The next week crawled by with the particular slowness of waiting for something good. Adrian tried not to check his phone obsessively, with mixed success. He and Celeste texted sporadically. Her schedule was genuinely insane, filled with meetings that ran hours long and flights that got delayed and crises that required immediate attention. But she checked in when she could, sending him photos of terrible conference room coffee and complaints about hotel pillows, and random observations about the people around her. Emma noticed he was distracted. "Daddy, you're smiling at your phone again," she said Wednesday night during dinner. Adrian looked up guiltily. "Sorry, baby. What were you saying about the field trip? Are you texting a girl?" The question was so direct and unexpected that Adrian nearly choked on his pasta. "What makes you think that?" Emma gave him a look that suggested she found his intelligence questionable. "Because you smile different when you look at your phone now, and you keep checking it even when it doesn't make noise." Adrian set his phone face down on the table, feeling caught. "I have a friend I've been talking to, that's all." "A girlfriend or a girlfriend?" "Just a friend right now. But you want her to be your girlfriend." It wasn't a question. Adrian looked at his 7-year-old daughter and wondered when exactly she'd become so perceptive. "Maybe," he admitted. "We're still figuring it out." Emma considered this while spearing broccoli with her fork. "Is she nice?" "Very nice." "Is she pretty?" "Yes." "Does she like kids?" Adrian hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? Celeste had said she was terrified of meeting Emma, but terror didn't mean dislike. Still, he didn't actually know. They'd talked about Emma plenty, but talking about children and actually wanting to be around them were entirely different things. "I don't know yet," Adrian said honestly. "We haven't gotten that far." "Okay." Emma returned her attention to her dinner, apparently satisfied. Then, after a moment, "If you like her, you should tell her. Maya's mom says boys are bad at saying their feelings, and it makes everything harder." Adrian bit back a laugh. Maya's mom sounds smart. "She is. She's a dentist." Friday the 18th arrived with pouring rain and unseasonably cold temperatures. Adrian dropped Emma at Karen's house, endured another round of subtle interrogation about his plans, and drove to Salem through weather that made the highway feel vaguely treacherous. The restaurant Celeste had chosen was downtown, small and warmly lit, the kind of place that probably called itself cozy in online reviews. Adrian arrived first, shaking rain from his jacket, and waited near the bar. Celeste appeared 10 minutes later, hair damp despite an umbrella, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked expensive but casual. When she saw him, her whole face lit up in a way that made Adrian's stomach flip. "Hi," she said, a little breathless. "Hi yourself." They were shown to a corner table, the restaurant busy but not crowded, conversation humming pleasantly in the background. Celeste ordered wine for both of them without asking, the same kind they'd had in Portland, and Adrian didn't object. "How was San Francisco?" he asked once they were settled. "Productive and exhausting. I spent 3 days in back-to-back meetings trying to convince investors that sustainable growth is actually more valuable than extracting maximum profit in minimum time." She rubbed her temples. "They were not convinced." "Will they come around?" "Some of them. The rest will pull out, and I'll find new investors who actually share my vision." She said it matter-of-factly, like losing millions in funding was a minor inconvenience. "But that's incredibly boring. Tell me about your week." So Adrian did. About the user who'd somehow downloaded 17 browser toolbars and couldn't understand why their internet was slow. About Emma's tooth fairy expectations and her pointed observations about his texting habits. About Mr. Whiskers learning to open cabinet doors and the chaos that had ensued. Celeste listened with the kind of attention that made Adrian feel like nothing else in the world existed beyond their corner table. "Emma knows about me?" she asked when he mentioned his daughter's interrogation. "She knows I'm talking to someone. She doesn't know details." "What did you tell her?" "That we're still figuring things out." Adrian met Celeste's eyes. "Because we are, right?" "Right." Celeste reached across the table, her fingers finding his. "Though I'm starting to have some pretty clear ideas about what I want this to be." "Yeah?" "Yeah, so She looked nervous suddenly, uncertain in a way he rarely saw from her. "I want to actually date you, Adrian. Properly. Not just stolen dinners between everything else, but real time together. I want to know what you're like first thing in the morning and last thing at night. I want to meet Emma when you're ready for that. I want to stop pretending this is casual when it hasn't felt casual since that first dance." Adrian's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. "I want that too. But I'm scared of what happens when your world and mine try to occupy the same space. When you realize that my life is small and routine and nothing like yours. Your life isn't small, Adrian. It's just different. Celeste squeezed his hand. And honestly, I'm envious of it sometimes. The simplicity, the clear priorities, knowing exactly what matters and building everything around that. You could have that if you wanted. Could I? Her smile was sad. I've built an empire that employs hundreds of people and manages billions in assets. I can't just walk away because I'm tired or lonely or want a simpler life. Too many people depend on the stability I provide. So you're trapped. Not trapped, just responsible for something bigger than myself. She paused. But that doesn't mean I can't also have something for myself, something that's mine and not the company's or the investors or the board's. Is that what I am? Something just for you? I hope so, if you'll let me be. Their food arrived, interrupting the intensity of the moment. They ate and talked about easier things, books they'd read, shows they'd watched, the small cultural touchstones that helped map someone else's interior landscape. Celeste was surprisingly well-versed in reality TV, which she watched as a guilty pleasure after particularly brutal workdays. Adrian admitted to a secret love of true crime podcasts, which he listened to while doing dishes or folding laundry. That seems dark for someone raising a small child, Celeste said, amused. Emma can't know that statistically most murders are committed by someone the victim knows. She needs to maintain her faith in humanity for at least a few more years. What about your faith in humanity? Shaky but persistent. Celeste laughed, and the sound filled something hollow in Adrian's chest. After dinner, they sat in Adrian's car in the parking lot, rain drumming on the roof, neither ready to say goodbye. The windows fogged from their breathing, creating a small bubble of privacy in the middle of the wet evening. I don't want to go home yet, Celeste said quietly. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Anywhere. Nowhere. She turned to face him in the dim light from the street lamps. I just don't want this to end. Adrian understood completely. Every time they parted, there was the fear that the distance would stretch too far, that real life would intrude and whatever fragile thing they were building would collapse under the weight of logistics and incompatibility. Come back to Eugene with me, he heard himself say. Celeste's eyes widened. To your apartment? Yeah, it's small and nothing special, but it's mine. And I want you to see it, to see my actual life instead of just hearing about it secondhand. What about Emma? She's with her mom until Sunday evening. It's just me and a cat who's probably destroyed something in my absence. Celeste bit her lip, considering. Then she nodded. Okay, yes, I'll follow you. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. The drive back to Eugene felt surreal. Adrian kept checking his rearview mirror, half expecting Celeste's sleek car to disappear, this whole thing revealed as some elaborate fantasy. But she stayed behind him the whole way, her headlights steady in the rain. His apartment looked exactly how he'd left it, small and cluttered and lived in. Dishes in the sink, Emma's drawings magneted to the fridge, Mr. Whiskers lounging on the couch looking supremely unimpressed by the visitors. Adrian felt a flash of embarrassment at the contrast between this and Celeste's pristine high-rise, but Celeste just looked around with something like wonder. This is perfect, she said. It's a mess. It's real. She picked up one of Emma's drawings from the coffee table, a crayon rendering of their family of 2+1 purple cat. This is what an actual home looks like, not just a place you sleep between work obligations. Adrian didn't know what to say to that. He made coffee while Celeste explored his small space, examining his meager bookshelf, the photos stuck to the fridge with alphabet magnets, the corner where Emma's toys were imperfectly contained in a basket. She looks like you, Celeste said, pointing to a photo of Emma grinning gap-toothed at the camera. She has her mother's eyes, but yeah, mostly me. She's beautiful. She's a handful. Adrian handed Celeste a mug. Smart enough to argue about everything, stubborn enough to never give up, and apparently perceptive enough to know I'm texting someone I like. Did that conversation go badly? Actually, no. She asked if you were nice and pretty, and if you like kids. Then she told me I should tell you how I feel because boys are bad at expressing emotions. Celeste laughed, nearly spilling her coffee. She sounds amazing. She is. She's also the most important thing in my life, which means if she doesn't like you, this doesn't work. I need you to know that going in. I know. Celeste set her mug down carefully. And I need you to know that I have no idea how to be around kids. I'll probably say the wrong thing or be awkward or mess it up somehow. That's okay. Emma's met plenty of adults who are awkward around children. She finds it entertaining. They settled on the couch, Mr. Whiskers immediately relocating to Celeste's lap, as if recognizing someone who needed the comfort. She stroked his fur absently, and Adrian watched her slowly relax into his space. "Can I ask you something?" Celeste said after a while. "Always." "What happened with Emma's mother? You've mentioned you split up, but never why." Adrian considered how much to share, then he remembered their agreement about honesty. We were young and unprepared and had completely different ideas about what parenthood would look like. Karen wanted to keep living the life we'd had before, going out, traveling, maintaining friendships and hobbies. She thought we could just fold a baby into our existing routine without much changing. I knew that was impossible, that everything had to shift to make room for Emma's needs. "So you resented each other?" "Yeah, I resented her for not stepping up. She resented me for becoming boring and overprotective. Eventually, the resentment became the whole relationship. We stayed together longer than we should have, thinking we needed to for Emma's sake, but she was picking up on the tension, becoming anxious and withdrawn. So we finally admitted it wasn't working and split custody." "Do you still love her?" The question was careful, like Celeste was bracing for an answer she didn't want to hear. "No," Adrian said honestly. "I care about her because she's Emma's mother, and we've gotten better at co-parenting now that we're not trying to be a couple. But whatever romantic feelings existed died a long time ago under the weight of trying to be people we weren't." Celeste nodded slowly, processing that. "I've never been in love," she admitted. "Not really. I've had relationships, but they were always complicated by what I am more than who I am. And at some point, I stopped being able to tell the difference." "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know if anyone has ever actually loved me, or if they love the idea of being with someone successful and wealthy and powerful. I don't know if I've ever been wanted for myself." Adrian reached over and took her hand. "I want you for yourself. I don't give a damn about your money, or your companies, or your public image. I just want Celeste, the woman who watches trash TV after hard days and admits when she's scared and texts me random observations about the world because she knows I'll understand them." Celeste's eyes were suddenly bright with unshed tears. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear without it feeling calculated or manipulative. Because I mean it. Every word." She leaned in and kissed him then, and it felt different than it had in Portland. Less desperate, more certain, like they'd crossed some invisible threshold into something more solid and real. When they broke apart, Celeste was smiling. "I should probably go. It's late, and you have Emma tomorrow. Wait, no, Sunday, still." "Or you could stay." Adrian's heart was loud in his ears. "Not for, unless you want, but just to sleep, like in Portland." "You sure?" "Very sure." Adrian's bedroom was even smaller than Celeste's, but somehow it didn't feel cramped when they climbed into bed together. She curled into his side like it was the most natural thing in the world, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "This is nice," she murmured, already half asleep. "Yeah, it really is." Adrian lay awake for a while after Celeste's breathing had evened out into sleep, feeling the weight and warmth of her against him. Mr. Whiskers had followed them and was now curled at the foot of the bed, purring loudly enough to be heard over the rain still falling outside. This was real. This woman in his bed, brilliant and powerful and successful beyond anything Adrian had ever imagined for himself, had chosen to be here. In his small apartment with his second-hand furniture and his daughter's toys scattered across the floor. Had chosen him somehow, despite all the logical reasons she shouldn't. The fear was still there. The certainty that this couldn't last, that eventually their different worlds would prove incompatible. But lying there in the dark with Celeste sleeping peacefully against him, Adrian let himself believe, just for tonight, that maybe they could make this work. Morning came too soon and too bright. Adrian woke to find Celeste already awake, propped on one elbow, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "That's not creepy at all," he said, voice rough with sleep. She smiled. "You snore a little. It's cute." "I do not snore." "You absolutely do. Not loud, just this soft rumbling sound." She poked his chest. Very endearing. Adrian captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. What time is it? Early, maybe 7. I've been awake for a while, but didn't want to move and wake you. You could have. I'm used to early mornings with Emma. I liked watching you sleep. You look peaceful, less worried than you do when you're awake. I am less worried when I'm unconscious. Celeste laughed, the sound filling his small bedroom with warmth. Fair point. They made breakfast together in Adrian's tiny kitchen, scrambled eggs again, because it was apparently the only thing Celeste could cook reliably, plus toast and coffee. They ate standing at the counter because Adrian didn't have a table, just Emma's kid-sized one shoved in the corner. I should go, Celeste said eventually, though she made no move toward the door. I have a conference call at 10 that I can't miss. Where will you take it? Probably my apartment in Portland, though I could work from the car if I had to. She set her mug in the sink. That's my life. Always one phone call away from having to be on again. Do you ever get to just be off? Not often enough. She turned to face him. But last night, this morning, this felt off in the best possible way, like I got to just exist without performing. Adrian pulled her close, kissing her forehead. You can have this whenever you want. This doesn't have to be rare. Doesn't it? Our schedules barely align, my work is constant, and soon you'll need to factor Emma into everything, which makes it even more complicated. Complicated doesn't mean impossible, no, but it means hard. Celeste pulled back slightly to meet his eyes. I need you to know what you're signing up for if we really do this. I travel constantly. I work 80-hour weeks sometimes. I have obligations I can't cancel and crises that will interrupt our plans. I'll disappoint you, repeatedly, and I need to know you're okay with that before we go any further. Adrian thought about it, really thought about it, instead of just rushing to reassure her. I won't pretend that's easy to hear, he said finally, or that it won't be frustrating when your work takes priority over us. But I also know that your work is part of who you are, not just something you do, and I don't want you to be someone different just to fit more easily into my life. Even if being who I am means we get less time together than you want, even then, as long as the time we do get is real. Celeste kissed him, soft and lingering and full of things neither of them were quite ready to say out loud yet. I need to go, she whispered against his lips, but I'll call you tomorrow. Actually call, not just text. I'll answer. And we'll figure out when I can see you again, soon, as soon as possible. Okay. Adrian walked her to her car, the morning cool and still damp from last night's rain. Before she got in, Celeste turned and hugged him tightly, her face buried in his shoulder. Thank you, she said, muffled against his shirt. For what? For letting me be ordinary with you. For not expecting me to be impressive or polished or anything except myself. You're always yourself with me. That's the whole point. She pulled back, eyes bright. I'm falling for you, Adrian Cross. In case that wasn't obvious. His breath caught. It was becoming clear. For what it's worth, I'm falling for you too. Worth a lot, actually. Then she was gone, pulling out of the parking lot in her expensive car, leaving Adrian standing in the cool morning air feeling like his entire life had just shifted on its axis. He went back inside to find Mr. Whiskers sitting in the middle of the living room, staring at him with what could only be described as judgment. Don't look at me like that, Adrian told the cat. I know this is complicated. Mr. Whiskers sneezed, unimpressed, and stalked off to his food bowl. Adrian's phone buzzed as he was washing the breakfast dishes. I miss you already. This is definitely pathetic now. He smiled, typing back with soapy hands. Still only pathetic if it's pathetic that I feel the same way. Then we're both hopelessly pathetic, and I'm okay with that. Me too. Adrian finished the dishes, straightened the apartment, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Celeste had been in his space, had slept in his bed, had met Mr. Whiskers and seen his daughter's drawings, and all the small mundane details that made up his actual life. And she hadn't run, hadn't pulled back or gotten scared or decided this was all too ordinary for someone like her. She'd stayed, had chosen to stay. That afternoon, Emma called from Karen's house, chattering about the movie they'd watched and the park they'd gone to. Adrian listened with half his attention, the other half still replaying the morning's conversation with Celeste. Daddy, you're not listening, Emma said accusingly. Sorry, baby, I'm listening now. What happened at the park? I said we saw a dog that looked like a mop, and Mom said we could maybe get a dog, but I told her we already have Mr. Whiskers and he wouldn't like a dog. That's very considerate of you. Is your friend nice? The question came out of nowhere, delivered in Emma's characteristically direct way. What? Your friend, the one you like. Is she nice? Adrian sat down heavily on the couch. How do you know about her? I heard you talking to Mommy when you dropped me off. You said you had dinner plans, and Mommy asked if it was with the same person as last time, and you said yes. Of course, Emma had been listening. His daughter had selective hearing when it came to instructions about cleaning her room, but apparently perfect recall for adult conversations about dating. She's nice, Adrian said carefully. Very nice. What's her name? Celeste. That's a pretty name, like celestial. We learned that word in school. It means sky things. That's right. When can I meet her? Adrian's chest tightened. I don't know yet, Em. We're still getting to know each other. But you like her a lot. I do. And she likes you? I think so. I hope so. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, okay, but when I do meet her, I need to make sure she's good enough for you. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. Love and gratitude and the overwhelming responsibility of raising a tiny human who was somehow already so fiercely protective. That's a deal, baby. When you meet her, you can decide if she's good enough. She probably will be if you like her. You have good taste. Where did you learn to say things like that? Maya's mom. She says lots of smart stuff. Remind me to thank Maya's mom. They talked for a few more minutes before Emma got distracted by something Karen was doing and hung up abruptly without saying goodbye. Adrian sat in his quiet apartment, phone in hand, and let himself imagine what it might look like when Celeste and Emma finally met. It would be awkward. Celeste would be nervous, Emma would be evaluative, and Adrian would probably stress himself into an ulcer trying to manage both of them. But he wanted it anyway. Wanted these two parts of his life to occupy the same space. Wanted to stop compartmentalizing and start integrating. His phone buzzed again. Conference call finished early. What are you doing? Sitting on my couch having an existential crisis about introducing you to my daughter. That sounds dramatic. Want to talk about it? Not yet. Still processing. Fair enough. I'm here when you're ready. Adrian stared at those words for a long moment. Such a simple promise, but it meant everything. She was here. She would be here. Even when things got complicated or scary or hard. He typed back, I want you to meet Emma soon. Whenever you're ready. I think she'll like you. What if she doesn't? Then we figure it out. But I think she will. I'm terrified. Me too. But let's be terrified together. Okay. Yes, soon. Adrian set his phone down and looked around his small apartment. At Emma's toys and Mr. Whiskers now sleeping in a patch of sunlight and the breakfast dishes he'd just washed. At the life he'd built from necessity and sacrifice and love. It wasn't much by Celeste's standards. Wasn't impressive or glamorous or worthy of magazine features, but it was real and honest and completely his. And somehow, impossibly, Celeste wanted to be part of it. That night, after he'd cleaned and meal prepped for the week ahead and done all the responsible adult tasks that made up his evenings, Adrian lay in bed where Celeste had slept the night before. The sheets still smelled faintly of her perfume. Mr. Whiskers was curled against his side, purring contentedly. His phone lit up with one final message. Thank you for this weekend. For your honesty and your tiny apartment and your judgmental cat. For letting me see your real life instead of the version you think I want to see. I'm falling harder every time I talk to you, and it's terrifying and wonderful, and I wouldn't change it for anything. Adrian read it 3 times, something warm and certain settling in his chest. He wrote back, thank you for choosing me, for seeing something worth knowing beneath all the ordinary, for not running when you saw how small and simple my life actually is. I'm falling too, have been since that first dance, and I'm done pretending I'm not. Her response came immediately. Then let's stop pretending and see where this goes. Deal. Adrian fell asleep smiling, his phone on the pillow beside him, and for the first time in years felt like his life might be expanding instead of contracting, like there might be room for something beyond responsibility and routine, like maybe, just maybe, he deserved this bright, impossible thing that had walked into his carefully controlled world and refused to leave. The meeting happened sooner than Adrian expected, and entirely by accident. He'd planned it carefully in his head. A casual lunch, somewhere Emma-friendly, maybe the park if the weather cooperated. Enough structure to feel safe, but relaxed enough that nobody would be too nervous. He'd talked to Emma about it, explained that Celeste was someone important to him, and he wanted them to meet. Emma had nodded seriously and asked if Celeste liked pizza, because that seemed to be her primary criterion for judging adults. But plans, Adrian had learned, were just suggestions life felt free to ignore. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unseasonably warm for late October. Adrian had picked Emma up from school and stopped at the grocery store for the weekly shopping trip that always somehow took twice as long as it should, because Emma needed to examine every interesting package and ask questions about ingredients he didn't know how to answer. They were in the cereal aisle, Emma lobbying hard for something that was more sugar than grain, when Adrian's phone rang. Celeste's name lit up the screen. "Hold that thought, baby," he told Emma, stepping slightly away. "Hey." "Hi." Celeste's voice was strained. "Bad timing?" "Just grocery shopping with Emma. What's wrong?" "I'm in Eugene. My meeting in Portland ended early and I was driving back when my car started making this horrible grinding noise. I pulled into a mechanic shop, but they can't look at it until tomorrow, and She paused, and Adrian could hear the frustration bleeding through. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be calling you with this. You're with Emma, and I can just get a rental or something." Adrian's mind raced. Celeste was here, in Eugene, stranded and stressed, and Emma was standing 3 feet away, holding a box of cereal that was probably 40% marshmallows, completely oblivious to the fact that her father's carefully laid plans were about to implode. "Where are you?" Adrian asked. "Martinez Auto on 6th Street. But seriously, you don't have to. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Adrian, you have Emma. I know, it's fine. We're coming." He hung up before she could protest further and turned to find his daughter watching him with sharp, knowing eyes. "Was that Celeste?" Emma asked. "Yes, her car broke down and she needs help." "So we're going to help her?" "Yeah, we are." Emma considered this, still clutching her terrible cereal choice. "Does this mean I'm going to meet her?" Adrian's stomach did something complicated. "Yes, right now, actually. Is that okay?" His daughter straightened her shoulders in a way that reminded Adrian painfully of himself when he was trying to be brave about something scary. "That's okay, but we should bring her something nice since her car is broken. Maybe cookies?" "That's very thoughtful, Em." They grabbed a package of the fancy bakery cookies Emma loved, checked out faster than they ever had before, and drove to the mechanic shop with Adrian's heart beating too fast and his palms sweaty on the steering wheel. Celeste was standing outside the shop looking more disheveled than Adrian had ever seen her. Her hair was coming loose from its usual neat arrangement. She wore jeans and a blazer that looked expensive but rumpled, and her expression was tight with stress. When she saw Adrian's car pull up, relief flooded her face. Then she saw Emma in the back seat, and the relief transformed into something that looked a lot like panic. Adrian parked and got out, Emma already unbuckling herself with the determined efficiency of a 7-year-old on a mission. "Hi," he said, reaching Celeste in a few quick steps. "Sorry about the ambush." "I didn't know. You didn't say—" Celeste's eyes tracked to Emma, who was climbing out of the car with the package of cookies clutched in both hands. "I know. This wasn't how I wanted this to happen either, but here we are." Emma walked over with careful deliberation, stopping directly in front of Celeste and looking up at her with an evaluative expression that would have been intimidating on someone 3 times her size. "You're Celeste," Emma said. It wasn't a question. "I am." Celeste's voice was carefully controlled, but Adrian could hear the nervousness underneath. "And you must be Emma." "I am. Your car is broken?" "It appears so. It started making a terrible noise and I was worried it might be dangerous to keep driving." "That was smart. My daddy says it's important to be safe even when it's inconvenient." Emma held out the cookies. "We brought you these. When bad things happen, cookies help." Celeste took the package with something that looked suspiciously like tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you. That's very kind." "You're welcome. Daddy says you're important to him, so I wanted to make sure you were okay." Adrian wanted to sink into the pavement. He also wanted to hug his daughter for being so perfectly, devastatingly herself. Celeste glanced at Adrian, her expression unreadable, then back at Emma. "Your dad is very important to me too." "Good. He deserves people who think he's important." Emma paused, then added with perfect 7-year-old logic, "Do you like pizza?" "I do." "What about cats?" "I like them very much. I met Mr. Whiskers recently. He's very dignified." "He thinks he's royalty. Daddy says he has delusions of grandeur, which means he thinks he's better than he actually is, but I think he's just confident." Celeste laughed, a real laugh that broke through the nervous tension. "That's a very generous interpretation. I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. That's what Maya's mom says to do." "Maya's mom sounds very wise." "She is. She's a dentist." Adrian watched this exchange with a mixture of terror and wonder. Emma was being herself, direct, thoughtful, slightly odd in the way smart kids often were. And Celeste was holding her own, not talking down to Emma or being falsely enthusiastic, just engaging honestly. "So what's the verdict on your car?" Adrian asked, trying to give everyone a moment to breathe. Celeste turned to him gratefully. "They think it's the transmission. Won't know for sure until they can get it on the lift tomorrow morning. They recommended I not drive it." "Where were you headed?" "Back to Portland. I have a meeting at 8 tomorrow morning." Adrian checked his watch. 4:30. Portland was 90 minutes away in good traffic, longer in evening rush hour. "You could take my car. I don't need it until tomorrow afternoon." "I can't take your car, Adrian." "Why not?" "Because what if something happens to it? Or what if you do need it before tomorrow afternoon?" "Then I'll figure it out." "It's fine." Emma tugged on Adrian's sleeve. "Or she could stay at our house tonight. Then she wouldn't have to drive anywhere and could take her car when it's fixed tomorrow." Adrian's heart stopped. Celeste's eyes went wide. "That's very nice of you to offer," Celeste said carefully. "But I'm sure your dad didn't plan on having a guest tonight." "We never plan on guests. They just happen." Emma looked up at her father. "Right, Daddy?" "Right," Adrian managed, his mind racing through the implications. "Em, can you give us 1 second?" "Okay." Emma wandered over to peer through the mechanic shop window at the cars inside, giving them a semblance of privacy. "You don't have to do this," Celeste said immediately. "I can get a rental, drive back to Portland, figure something else out. I know this isn't how you wanted us to meet." "It's not. But Emma's right. You could stay with us. Take my car in the morning, come back when yours is ready." He paused. "Unless you don't want to. I know staying overnight in my apartment with my daughter present is a lot different than the last time." "It's not that I don't want to. I'm terrified of messing this up, of saying the wrong thing, or being awkward, or having Emma decide I'm not good enough for you." "Join the club. I've been terrified of that since we started talking about you two meeting." Celeste glanced over at Emma, who was now narrating something to herself while examining the mechanic shop's waiting area through the window. "She's wonderful, Adrian, and terrifying. How is she so self-possessed at 7? "I have no idea. She definitely didn't get that from me." "So do I stay?" Adrian thought about all the ways this could go wrong, about how his carefully controlled life was about to collide completely with this new, fragile thing he'd been building with Celeste, about how there would be no more compartmentalizing after tonight. Either this worked or it didn't, and Emma's opinion would decide which. "Stay," he said. "Please." Celeste nodded, looking both relieved and terrified. "Okay, but if I'm terrible at this, you have to tell me." "Deal." They collected Emma, got Celeste's overnight bag from her car, and drove back to Adrian's apartment in a silence that felt charged with possibility and dread. Emma kept sneaking glances at Celeste in the rear-view mirror, her expression thoughtful and evaluative. At the apartment, Mr. Whiskers greeted them with his usual indifference, sniffing Celeste's shoes before stalking off to his food bowl. "He remembers you," Emma observed. "He doesn't usually sniff people twice." "Is that good?" Celeste asked. "It means you passed the first test. He's very picky about people." Adrian started unloading groceries while Emma gave Celeste a comprehensive tour of their small apartment, pointing out important landmarks like her art corner, the bookshelf arranged by color because it looked prettier that way, and the closet where Mr. Whiskers liked to hide when he was plotting something. "And this is Daddy's room," Emma said, pushing open the door. "It's boring because he doesn't decorate, but he says that's because minimalism is a lifestyle choice." "I never said that," Adrian called from the kitchen. "You said something like it." "I said I don't have time to decorate." "Same thing." Celeste appeared in the kitchen doorway, trying very hard not to laugh. "She's relentless. You have no idea." Adrian closed the refrigerator and leaned against the counter. How are you doing? Honestly, I have no idea. This is the weirdest first impression I've ever made. Emma doesn't care about first impressions. She cares about whether you're genuine. Am I passing? So far? He smiled at her worried expression. You're doing fine. Just be yourself. Emma bounced back into the kitchen. Can Celeste stay for dinner? We have stuff for spaghetti, and Daddy makes it really good. She's already staying the night, remember? Her car needs to be fixed. I know, but I meant specifically for dinner, like as a guest, not just someone who got stuck here. Would you like to stay for dinner? Adrian asked Celeste formally, playing along. I would be honored. Then it's settled, Emma beamed. Can I help cook? The next hour was controlled chaos. Emma insisted on showing Celeste how they made sauce from scratch, which involved a lot of narrative explanation about why they chopped vegetables a certain way and the proper technique for tasting sauce without burning your tongue. Celeste listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions and following Emma's very specific instructions about stirring. Adrian watched them together while draining pasta, his chest tight with something he couldn't quite name. Emma was being perfectly herself, enthusiastic and precise and slightly bossy. And Celeste was letting her be, not trying to impress or perform, just engaging honestly with a 7-year-old's worldview. Dinner was surprisingly easy. They ate at Emma's kid-sized table because Adrian still didn't have a proper dining table. All three of them crowded around it with their knees bumping. Emma dominated the conversation, telling Celeste about school and her friends and the ongoing saga of whether her teacher was secretly a vampire because she never ate lunch in front of the students. That's concerning, Celeste said seriously. Have you looked for other evidence? She's very pale, and she doesn't like garlic bread. The garlic bread thing is pretty damning. Emma nodded solemnly. That's what I said. After dinner, Adrian started cleaning up while Emma pulled out her homework. Celeste offered to help with dishes, and they worked in comfortable silence while Emma worked on math problems at the table. She's amazing, Celeste said quietly, rinsing a plate. I expected her to be great because she's yours, but she's just this fully formed person with opinions and observations and such a clear sense of who she is. She terrifies me sometimes, in the best way. I can see why. Celeste handed him the plate to dry. I'm also completely out of my depth. I have no idea what I'm doing. You're doing fine, better than fine. I compared her teacher to a vampire. She loved that. Emma looked up from her homework. I can hear you guys, you know. You're not being quiet. Sorry, baby, Adrian said. How's the math going? It's fine. I'm good at math. She chewed on her pencil thoughtfully. Celeste, do you know about fractions? I do. Can you explain why we have to learn them? Daddy says they're important, but he can't explain why in a way that makes sense. Celeste dried her hands and went to sit next to Emma, looking at the worksheet. Well, they're useful for dividing things fairly. Like if you and two friends wanted to share a pizza, you'd each get 1/3, or if you're baking and need to adjust a recipe. But we could just use decimals. We could, but fractions are more precise sometimes, and they help you understand relationships between numbers in a different way than decimals do. Emma considered this. That's a better answer than Daddy's. Hey, Adrian protested. My answer was fine. Your answer was because they make you learn them in school, which is not actually an answer. Celeste laughed, and Adrian felt that same tight feeling in his chest, watching his daughter and the woman he was falling for bent over a math worksheet together, engaged in a completely serious debate about the practical applications of fractions. Homework finished, Emma requested her bedtime story routine. Adrian started to explain to Celeste that this was usually his time with Emma, but his daughter interrupted. Celeste can stay if she wants. We're reading Harry Potter. We're on the 3rd book. Celeste looked at Adrian questioningly. You don't have to, he said. This usually takes about half an hour, and Emma has very specific preferences about voices for different characters. I'd like to, if that's okay with Emma. It's okay with me. They all crowded into Emma's small bedroom, Adrian sitting on the bed with Emma curled against his side, Celeste in the chair by the desk. Adrian read, doing the voices Emma demanded, feeling hyper-aware of Celeste watching them. When he stumbled over a particularly complex passage, Celeste smiled but didn't comment. Emma fell asleep before the chapter ended, her breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of childhood sleep. Adrian carefully extracted himself, tucking her blanket around her shoulders. Celeste followed him out, pulling the door mostly closed behind them. In the living room, they both seemed to deflate slightly. The performance of being around Emma suddenly lifted. "That was intense," Celeste said, sinking onto the couch. "That was actually pretty calm for Emma. Sometimes she has big feelings about bedtime, and it's a whole negotiation." "She's incredible, Adrian. Truly." "She liked you." "How can you tell?" "Because she let you stay for story time. She's very protective of that routine. If she didn't like you, she would have found a polite way to exclude you." Celeste looked genuinely touched. "That means a lot, us." Adrian sat next to her, close enough that their legs touched. "You were great with her. Natural. Not trying too hard." "I was terrified the entire time. It didn't show." "Good. I was aiming for competent adult and hoping I'd land somewhere in that vicinity. You landed on person Emma will definitely ask about the next time we talk." Adrian took her hand. "Which means this is real now. She knows about you. She's met you. There's no more keeping things separate. Is that okay?" "Yeah, scary, but okay." He squeezed her fingers. "What about you? Is this okay? You just got thrown into the deep end of my actual life with no warning." Celeste was quiet for a moment, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. "I keep waiting for this to feel like too much. For the reality of your life, the kid and the small apartment and the routine, to feel limiting or boring or like something I need to escape from." She looked at him, eyes serious. "But it doesn't. It feels real in a way nothing in my life has felt in years. Like maybe this is what I've been missing without knowing it. A 7-year-old interrogating you about vampires? That. The homework battles. The bedtime stories. The complete lack of performance or pretense. Just people being themselves and making it work." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I like your life, Adrian. I like being in it." Adrian kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I like you being in it too." They sat like that for a while, the apartment quiet around them, except for the ambient sounds of Mr. Whiskers doing something probably destructive in the other room and the occasional car passing outside. "I should sleep on the couch," Celeste said eventually. "Emma might get the wrong idea if she finds me in your bed in the morning." "The couch is terrible. You'll wake up with a backache. I've slept in worse places." "That's a depressing statement. Corporate life is full of depressing statements." She sat up, looking at him seriously. "But I mean it. I don't want to confuse Emma or move too fast with her around." "That's fair." Adrian stood, getting spare blankets and a pillow from the closet. "For what it's worth, I think she already knows we're together. She's perceptive like that." Knowing and seeing evidence are different things. Also fair. Adrian made up the couch as comfortably as possible, which wasn't very comfortable given that it was a secondhand piece of furniture designed for sitting, not sleeping. Celeste changed in the bathroom, emerging in sleep clothes that looked expensive even in their simplicity. "Thank you for this," she said, settling onto the couch. "For letting me crash your evening and meet Emma in the least planned way possible. Thank you for being so good with her." Adrian crouched next to the couch, bringing himself eye level with her. "And for not running when you saw what my actual life looks like up close. I told you, I like your actual life." He kissed her goodnight, soft and brief, very aware that his daughter was sleeping 20 feet away. "Sleep well." "You too." Adrian went to his own room, leaving his door cracked in case Emma needed him in the night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, processing the entire surreal evening. Celeste was asleep on his terrible couch. Emma had met her and not hated her. The two most important parts of his life had just collided, and somehow, miraculously, nobody had gotten hurt in the impact. His phone lit up with a text. "Your couch is indeed terrible, but I'm still glad I'm here." Adrian smiled in the darkness. "Me too. Good night, Celeste." "Good night." Morning came with the sound of Emma's door opening and small feet padding to the bathroom. Adrian got up, pulling on a t-shirt, and found his daughter standing in the living room staring at Celeste's sleeping form on the couch. "She's still here," Emma whispered. "Her car's still broken, remember?" "I know. I just wanted to make sure she didn't leave." Adrian's heart squeezed. "Come on, let's make breakfast quietly and let her sleep." They made pancakes together in near silence. Emma measuring ingredients with exaggerated care to avoid making noise. Celeste woke about halfway through, drawn by the smell of coffee and cooking food. "Good morning," she said, voice rough with sleep, hair disheveled in a way that made Adrian's stomach flip. "Morning," Emma said cheerfully. "We made pancakes. Daddy makes them shaped like animals, but I told him to make normal circles today because I didn't know if you'd think animal pancakes were babyish." "I would absolutely not think animal pancakes are babyish. I would think they're delightful." Emma's face lit up. "Daddy, make elephant pancakes. Those are the best." Adrian made elephant pancakes, or his approximation of them, which mostly just looked like circles with smaller circles attached, and they ate breakfast crowded around the small table again. Celeste fit into their morning routine like she'd always been there, helping Emma pick out clothes for school and listening to Adrian's rundown of the day's schedule. "I should go," Celeste said eventually, checking the time. "Get to Portland, change for my meeting. Come back this afternoon when the car's ready." "You can shower here if you want, save time." "I don't want to make you late for work. I work from home Wednesdays, it's fine." So Celeste showered while Adrian got Emma ready for school, and they all walked to the car together. Emma hugged Celeste goodbye without prompting, and Adrian's heart did something complicated at the sight of this woman he was falling for crouching down to Emma's level, taking the hug seriously. "It was really nice to meet you," Celeste said. "You too. Are you coming back?" Emma asked. "If your dad wants me to, then yes." "He wants you to, I can tell." Celeste laughed. "Then I'll come back." Adrian dropped Emma at school, and during her running commentary about how Celeste seemed nice and smart and good at explaining fractions, and did he think she really liked them, or was just being polite because adults did that sometimes? "I think she really likes us," Adrian said. "Good, because I really like her." "Yeah? Yeah, she doesn't talk to me like I'm stupid, and she takes my questions seriously, and she made you smile more than you usually do." Emma paused. "Plus, she's really pretty." "She is pretty." "Are you going to marry her?" Adrian nearly drove off the road. "What?" "Em, we've only been dating a few weeks." "So, when you know, you know. That's what Maya's mom says." "Maya's mom has a lot of opinions. Good ones, though." Adrian pulled up to the school drop-off line. "I'm not thinking about marriage right now, baby. I'm just thinking about getting to know Celeste better and seeing if we work well together." "Okay, but when you do think about it, I think you should say yes if she asks." "I'll keep that in mind." Emma kissed his cheek and bounced out of the car, already spotting her friends and racing off to join them. Adrian watched her go, this small person who'd just casually discussed his potential marriage like it was no bigger a deal than choosing breakfast cereal. His phone buzzed as he was pulling away. "Just got to my apartment. Conference call starts in 20 minutes. Thank you for last night, for Emma, for everything. Thank you for being so great with her." "She's easy to be great with. She's wonderful, Adrian. You've done an amazing job raising her. She'd probably say she raised herself with minimal input from me." She'd be lying. You can see your influence in every part of who she is. Adrian sat in his car in the school parking lot, staring at that message and feeling something fundamental shift in his chest. Celeste got it. Got Emma. Got him. Got what they'd built together in this small, ordinary life. "When can I see you again?" he typed. "This weekend? I'm back in Eugene Friday for the car pickup. I could stay through Sunday if you want company. Emma will be with her mom Friday night through Sunday afternoon. So yes, definitely yes." "Perfect. I'll text you when I'm heading your way. Drive safe. Always." Adrian drove home feeling lighter than he had in months. Maybe years. The impossibility of this thing with Celeste was slowly becoming possible. The fear that their worlds couldn't coexist was giving way to evidence that maybe they could. His apartment felt different when he got back. Not empty exactly, but marked by Celeste's presence. The couch cushions still held the impression of her sleeping there. A coffee mug she'd used sat in the sink, small traces of someone else occupying his carefully controlled space. Adrian cleaned up, started his workday, and tried to focus on the endless stream of tech support tickets. But his mind kept drifting to last night. Emma and Celeste talking about vampires, the three of them reading together, the easy way Celeste had folded herself into their routine. Around lunch, his phone rang. Karen's name on the screen made him tense instinctively. "Hey," he answered. "Emma says she met your girlfriend yesterday." Karen's voice carried that particular tone she used when she was trying to sound casual about something that bothered her. She met Celeste, yes. It wasn't planned. Celeste's car broke down and Emma was with me, and it just happened. Emma seemed to really like her. She did. That's good. A pause. You could have mentioned you were seeing someone seriously enough to introduce her to Emma. It happened fast. We've only been dating about a month. Emma says she's rich. Adrian closed his eyes. Of course Emma had mentioned that. His daughter missed nothing. She's financially comfortable, yes. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Emma says she drives a car that costs more than our rent and lives in a high-rise in Portland. Karen, what's your actual concern here? Silence. Then, I don't want Emma getting attached to someone who's not going to stick around. You know how she is. She gets invested in people. And if this woman is some wealthy CEO who's slumming it with us regular folks for a while before moving on, Emma's going to be the one who gets hurt. Adrian felt anger flash hot in his chest. Celeste isn't slumming it. She's someone I care about who happens to have money. Those two things aren't connected. Aren't they? Come on, Adrian. What does someone like that want with someone like you? Long term, I mean. The words hit exactly where they were meant to, landing on every insecurity Adrian had been trying to ignore. I don't know, but I'm choosing to trust that she's being honest about wanting to be with me. I hope you're right. For Emma's sake, for all our sakes. Adrian's voice came out harder than he intended. And for the record, I didn't introduce them lightly. Emma met her by accident, but I'm glad it happened. Celeste was great with her, kind and genuine and patient, all the things that actually matter. Okay, Karen sounded slightly mollified. I just worry. I know, so do I. But I'm being careful. They hung up shortly after, and Adrian sat with his laptop open, staring at nothing, Karen's words echoing in his head. What does someone like that want with someone like you? It was the same question he'd asked himself 100 times, the same fear that woke him up at 3 a.m., that this was temporary, that eventually Celeste would realize he wasn't worth the complication, that their different worlds would prove impossible to bridge. His phone buzzed. Celeste, like she had some kind of sixth sense for when he was spiraling. Meeting finally over. Survived on 4 hours of sleep and spite. How's your day? Adrian typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on complicated. Emma's mom called. She has concerns about you meeting Emma. What kind of concerns? The kind where she thinks you're too good for me and will eventually realize it and break Emma's heart in the process. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, can I call you? Yes. His phone rang immediately. Hi, Celeste said, voice tight. Tell me what she actually said. So Adrian did, repeating the conversation as accurately as he could remember. Celeste listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. She's not entirely wrong to worry, Celeste said finally. Adrian's stomach dropped. What? Not about me leaving you. That's not happening. But about Emma getting attached. Because I'm already attached, and if this doesn't work out for some reason, it won't just be you I'm losing. It'll be her too, and that terrifies me. Celeste, I know we haven't been together long. I know this is moving fast and we're both scared and there are 1,000 reasons this could fail. But I need you to hear this, Adrian. I'm not slumming it. I'm not killing time with you until someone better comes along. I'm choosing you, deliberately, every single day. Adrian's throat was tight. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard, because the hard parts are where you find out what's real. She paused. Emma's mother isn't wrong to protect her daughter, but she's wrong about my intentions. And if you need me to prove that somehow, tell me how, and I'll do it. I don't need you to prove anything. Then what do you need? Adrian thought about it. What did he need? Not grand gestures or promises about the future, just this. Celeste's voice on the other end of the line, steady and certain, choosing him again. Just this, he said. Just you being honest with me. That I can do. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important, her terrible meeting, his boring workday, the weather. Small talk that felt significant simply because they were having it. When they finally hung up, Adrian felt steadier. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and Emma's activities and the constant low-level anticipation of Friday. Celeste texted when she could, called once more late at night when she couldn't sleep, sent him a photo of her hotel room overlooking some city skyline with the caption, "Nothing about this feels like home anymore." "Where does feel like home?" Adrian wrote back. The response came immediately. "Wherever you are." Friday afternoon, Adrian dropped Emma at Karen's house and endured another round of careful questions about his plans. He kept his answers vague. Dinner with Celeste, maybe a movie, nothing Emma needed to worry about. Karen looked like she wanted to say more but held back, and Adrian was grateful for the restraint. Celeste's car had been fixed that morning. She'd texted him the diagnostic report, something about the transmission that Adrian didn't understand but that had apparently cost several $1,000s to repair, and said she'd be in Eugene by 6. Adrian cleaned his apartment with more care than usual, changed his sheets, tried to decide if preparing for Celeste to stay over was presumptuous or practical. Eventually, he just made sure everything was clean and left it at that. She arrived at 6:15 looking exhausted but happy. Adrian met her in the parking lot and she walked straight into his arms without preamble. "Hi," she said against his chest. "Hi yourself. How was the week?" "Long. Endless. I may have threatened to fire someone for incompetence, which my assistant says I'm not allowed to do anymore without running it by HR first." "Sounds very reasonable of your assistant." "She's a tyrant, but she keeps me from making impulsive decisions I'll regret, so I keep her around." Celeste pulled back to look at him. "Is Emma gone?" "Until Sunday afternoon." "So we have the whole weekend?" "The whole weekend." "Good." She kissed him, deep and thorough and full of the week's worth of missing him. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled. "I've been wanting to do that since Tuesday morning." "Just that?" Among other things. They went inside. Celeste had brought an overnight bag, clearly having learned from last time, and she dropped it by Adrian's bedroom door with clear intent. Adrian ordered Thai food because neither of them felt like cooking, and they ate sitting on his couch, legs tangled together, catching up on all the small details that didn't translate well over text. "Emma asked if you were coming back," Adrian said, stealing a piece of Celeste's pad thai. "What did you tell her?" "That you would if she wanted you to." "And does she?" "Very much. She told me she really likes you, and then asked if I was going to marry you." Celeste choked on her water. "She what?" "I know. I explained that we've only been dating a few weeks, and marriage wasn't exactly on the immediate agenda. She said, when you know, which is apparently something her friend's mom says." "Maya's mom?" "The dentist. Yes." Celeste was quiet for a moment, processing that. "What did you say?" "That I was focused on getting to know you better and seeing if we work well together." "Which is true. Also diplomatic." "I try." Adrian set his food down, turning to face her more fully. "But for what it's worth, I could see it. Eventually. Not now, we're nowhere near ready for that conversation. But I could imagine a future where that makes sense." Celeste's eyes were suddenly bright. "Yeah? Yeah, is that too much? Too soon?" "No, it's honest." She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "I could see it too. Scares the hell out of me, but I can see it." They finished dinner in comfortable silence, cleaned up together, and ended up back on the couch with no clear plan for the evening. Adrian was acutely aware that Emma wasn't here, that they had privacy and time, and no 7-year-old who might wander in asking for water. The awareness hung between them, charged and obvious. "We don't have to do anything," Adrian said. "We can just watch a movie, or talk, or—" Celeste kissed him, cutting off his nervous rambling. "I want to," she said against his mouth. "If you want to." "I definitely want to." "Then stop overthinking it." They made it to his bedroom in a tangle of hands and mouths and clothes, being removed with more enthusiasm than grace. Adrian was nervous. It had been over a year since he'd been with anyone, and never with someone who mattered this much. But Celeste was patient and present and clearly just as nervous as he was. It wasn't perfect. Adrian bumped his head on the headboard at one point, and they both laughed so hard they had to stop for a minute to recover. Celeste got self-conscious about a scar on her stomach from an appendectomy, and Adrian had to convince her he didn't care, that she was beautiful exactly as she was. But the imperfection made it real, made it theirs, and when they finally came together, it felt less like some choreographed fantasy and more like two actual people choosing each other. Celeste laughed, the sound filling his small bedroom with warmth. "Deal." They stayed in bed talking until nearly midnight, sharing stories and fears and dreams they'd never told anyone else. Celeste admitted she was thinking about stepping back from the day-to-day operations of her company, hiring someone else to be CEO, while she focused on the aspects she actually enjoyed. Adrian confessed that he'd been taking night classes online toward finishing his degree, something he hadn't told Emma or Karen or anyone because he was afraid of failing. "You won't fail," Celeste said firmly. "You don't know that. I know you. You don't give up on things that matter to you. This has mattered for 15 years. I still haven't finished. Because life got in the way. That's not the same as giving up." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "What do you want to do with the degree when you get it?" "I don't know, something that isn't tech support, something where I get to solve actual problems instead of just explaining to people why their password requirements exist." "You could work for me. I'm always looking for people who can explain complex things simply. I'm not taking a job from you out of pity." "Good thing I'm not offering one out of pity." Celeste's expression was serious. "I'm offering it because you're smart and patient and good with people. Those are actual skills, Adrian, valuable ones. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and Adrian woke some time before dawn to find Celeste already awake, watching him in the dim light. "You're doing it again," he murmured. "The creepy watching thing." "Can't help it. You're nice to look at." "You're delirious from lack of sleep." "Maybe." She traced a finger along his jaw. "Or maybe I'm just happy." Adrian pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Me too." The weekend unfolded in a series of small, perfect moments. Saturday morning pancakes and coffee, a walk through the park despite the cold, grocery shopping together, which somehow became fun instead of tedious when Celeste was there to make observations about the absurdity of having 17 varieties of the same cereal. Saturday night, they cooked dinner together, an ambitious recipe that Celeste found online and Adrian gamely attempted to execute, resulting in something edible if not exactly magazine-worthy. Sunday morning, they stayed in bed late, talking about nothing important, delaying the inevitable goodbye. Emma would be back at 3, and Celeste needed to be in Portland for a dinner meeting at 6. "I don't want to go," Celeste said, curled against Adrian's side. "Then don't." "I have to. Client dinner. Can't be rescheduled." "I know." Adrian ran his fingers through her hair. "When will I see you again?" "Next weekend? I'm in town Friday and Saturday with no obligations." "That works." "Emma will be here, though." "Good. I want to see her, if that's okay with you." Adrian's chest went tight with emotion he couldn't quite name. More than okay. They got up reluctantly, moving through the morning routine with the practiced ease of people who'd been doing this far longer than a few weeks. Celeste showered and dressed, packed her overnight bag, checked her phone for the messages that had accumulated overnight. At the door, she stopped and turned to face him. "This weekend was perfect," she said. "Thank you. Thank you for being here, for choosing to be here. Always." She kissed him softly. "Tell Emma I said hi, and that I'm looking forward to seeing her again." "I will." "Adrian?" "Yeah?" "I'm falling in love with you. Might have already fallen. I don't know. I just know that this feels different than anything else ever has, and I wanted you to know that." Adrian's breath caught. "I'm falling in love with you too. Pretty sure I have been since that first dance." Celeste's smile was brilliant and slightly teary. "Good. That makes this less terrifying." "Only slightly less." "I'll take it." She left, and Adrian stood in his doorway watching her drive away, feeling like his whole life had just expanded in ways he hadn't thought possible. His phone buzzed before she'd even left the parking lot. "Miss you already. See you Friday." Counting the days. Sap. "You love it. I really do." Adrian went inside to clean up before Emma came home and found himself smiling at nothing, humming while he worked. Mr. Whiskers watched from his perch on the couch, tail swishing in what might have been approval or might have been judgment. "Don't look at me like that," Adrian told the cat. "This is good. This is really good." Mr. Whiskers yawned, unimpressed by human emotional revelations. When Emma came home that afternoon, chattering about her weekend with her mother, she stopped mid-sentence and looked at Adrian suspiciously. "You look different," she announced. "Different how?" Happier. Like something good happened. Her eyes widened. Did Celeste stay here this weekend? She did? And you had fun? We had a lot of fun. Emma grinned. Good. I like her, Daddy. I like her a lot. Me too, baby. Me too. The crash came 3 weeks later, and it came from a direction Adrian hadn't been watching. Things had been good. Better than good. Celeste had spent the last 2 weekends in Eugene, folding herself into Adrian and Emma's routine with increasing ease. She'd learned Emma's preferences for bedtime stories, figured out that Mr. Whiskers only accepted affection on his terms, mastered the particular chaos of Sunday morning pancakes. Emma adored her. Adrian was deeply, terrifyingly in love with her. Everything felt like it was finally, impossibly working. Then a photo appeared online. Adrian first learned about it from a text from Jason, his friend from the wedding, sent at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. Dude, is this you? A link followed. Adrian opened it, still groggy with sleep, Emma eating cereal at the table behind him. It was a gossip website he'd never heard of, the kind that trafficked in celebrity sightings and society drama. The headline read, Billionaire CEO Celeste Arden's secret romance with ordinary single dad. Below it, a photo. Adrian and Celeste leaving his apartment building 3 days earlier, her hand in his, both of them laughing at something. It was a good photo, candid and warm. It was also deeply, fundamentally intrusive. Adrian's stomach dropped. The article was brief but thorough. It identified Adrian by name, mentioned his job in tech support, noted that he was a single father. It described Celeste as slumming it with a working-class nobody, in language that managed to be both condescending to Adrian and insulting to Celeste. The comments section was already filling with speculation about why someone like her would be with someone like him. His phone rang. Celeste. I just saw it, Adrian said instead of hello. I'm so sorry. Her voice was tight with anger and something that might have been fear. I don't know how they found out. Someone must have recognized me and tipped them off. I should have been more careful. Emma's right here. Can I call you back? Of course. But Adrian, I know. We'll figure it out. He hung up and turned to find Emma watching him with worried eyes. What's wrong, Daddy? Nothing, baby, just work stuff. She didn't believe him. Emma never believed his easy dismissals, but she let it go. Adrian got her ready for school on autopilot, his mind racing through implications. The article had his full name. Anyone who wanted to could probably find his address, his employer, Emma's school. The thought made his skin crawl. After dropping Emma off, Adrian sat in his car in the school parking lot and called Celeste back. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of. It's not your fault someone took our photo. It is, though. This is what my life looks like. This is what being with me means. No privacy, constant scrutiny, strangers thinking they have a right to opinions about our relationship. She sounded close to tears. And now they know about Emma. They mentioned you have a daughter. What if they start looking into her? What if photographers show up at her school? The fear in her voice matched the fear in Adrian's chest. Has that happened before? With people you've dated? I haven't dated anyone seriously enough for them to care. You're the first relationship that's felt real, which means you're the first one worth photographing. Adrian leaned his head against the steering wheel, trying to think through the panic. Okay, what do we do? I can have my publicist release a statement, something brief acknowledging that I'm in a relationship but requesting privacy. It might help. Might? The gossip cycle moves fast. If we don't feed it, they'll get bored and move on to someone else. But Adrian, she paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was small. If this is too much, I understand. If you need to step back for Emma's sake, I won't blame you. The offer landed like a stone. Celeste was giving him an out, expecting him to take it, already bracing for the loss. No, Adrian said. No? I'm not stepping back, neither are you. His voice was firmer than he felt. We knew this would be complicated. This is just one of the complications. It's not a small complication, Adrian. This is your privacy, your daughter's safety. I know what it is, and I'm choosing you anyway. He sat up, looking out at the school where Emma was probably already telling her friends about some new discovery. But we need to be smart about this. We need to protect Emma. Okay, yes. What do you need from me? They spent the next 20 minutes making a plan. Celeste would have her publicist handle the media side. Adrian would talk to Emma's school about increased security awareness. They'd be more careful about where they went in public, at least until the interest died down. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Work was impossible that day. Adrian couldn't focus on password resets and software updates when his phone kept buzzing with messages from people he hadn't talked to in years, all wanting to know if it was true, if he was really dating Celeste Arden. What was she like? How did they meet? He turned his phone on silent and tried to push through. Karen called during his lunch break. He almost didn't answer. "You're dating a billionaire," she said without preamble, "and I had to find out from a gossip website. It wasn't supposed to be public. Someone took our photo without permission. Emma's mentioned in the article, Adrian. Her name isn't there, but they say you're a single father. How long before someone connects those dots and starts digging into her life?" "I know. I'm handling it." "How? By ignoring it and hoping it goes away?" Karen's voice was sharp with worry. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Emma getting caught up in something that's way beyond what a 7-year-old should have to deal with." Adrian's grip on his phone tightened. "I'm not ignoring it. Celeste's publicist is releasing a statement. I've already called Emma's school. We're being careful. Being careful isn't enough when there are photographers and gossip columnists who see my daughter as a good story angle. Our daughter, and I'm doing everything I can to protect her. Then maybe you should think about whether this relationship is worth the risk." The words hit exactly where Karen intended. Adrian had been asking himself the same question all morning, weighing Emma's safety against his feelings for Celeste, wondering if loving someone was worth making his daughter's life more complicated. "I need to go," he said, instead of answering. "I'll call you later." He hung up and sat staring at his computer screen, Karen's question echoing in his head. Was this worth the risk? His phone buzzed. Celeste. Publicist released the statement. "Very boring and diplomatic. Should help. Thank you. How are you holding up?" Adrian thought about lying, about being strong and reassuring. Then he remembered their agreement about honesty. "Not great." Karen called. "She's worried about Emma being dragged into this. She's right to be worried." "So am I. Are you having second thoughts?" The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, "About us?" "Never." "About whether I'm being selfish asking you and Emma to deal with this?" "Constantly." Adrian's chest tightened. This was the moment. He could take the easy out, agree that this was too complicated, let Celeste walk away thinking she was protecting them. It would be simple and safe and absolutely the wrong choice. "Don't," he typed. "Don't decide for us what we can handle. Let us make that choice. Even if the choice puts Emma at risk, Emma is going to face challenges in life, no matter what I do. At least this one comes with the benefit of her father being happy for the first time in years. That's not enough justification if something bad happens. Then we make sure nothing bad happens. Together." Celeste didn't respond for several minutes. When she did, it was simple. "I love you." Adrian stared at the words on his screen, reading them over and over. She'd said she was falling in love with him, but this was different. This was present tense, declarative, absolute. "I love you too," he wrote back, "which is why we're going to figure this out instead of running from it." "Okay. Yes. Together." That evening, Adrian sat Emma down for what he knew would be a difficult conversation. She was building an elaborate structure with her Legos, tongue poking out in concentration, completely unaware that her simple life was about to get more complicated. "Em, I need to talk to you about something important." She looked up, instantly reading his serious tone. "Is it about Celeste?" "How did you know?" "Because you only use that voice when it's something big, and the biggest thing in your life right now is Celeste." Emma set down her Legos. "What happened?" Adrian pulled out his phone and showed her the article, watching her face as she read. Her reading skills were good enough to get the gist, even if she didn't understand all the words. "Why did they write about you?" she asked. "Because Celeste is famous. And when famous people date someone, other people think it's interesting and want to know about it." "But you're not famous." "No, I'm not. Which is why this feels weird and invasive." Emma studied the photo. "You both look happy in this picture." "We were happy. We are happy." "Then why does it matter what strangers write about you?" It was such a simple question, delivered with such clear 7-year-old logic that Adrian almost laughed. "It matters because those strangers might try to learn more about us. About you. and I want to make sure you're safe and that your life doesn't get disrupted by people being nosy." Emma considered this. "Will people come to my school?" "I don't think so, but I talked to your principal just in case, and they're going to make sure no one who isn't supposed to be there can get close to you." "Okay." She picked up a Lego brick, turning it over in her small hands. "Are you going to stop seeing Celeste because of this?" "No, absolutely not." "Good, because I like her, and you're happy when she's around. You smile more, and you don't look so tired all the time." Adrian's throat went tight. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything, Daddy. You taught me to pay attention to people." He pulled her into a hug, this small person who saw too much and understood things no 7-year-old should have to think about. "I love you, baby, and I promise I won't let anything bad happen to you because of this." "I know, you always keep me safe." She pulled back to look at him seriously. "But Daddy, you deserve to be happy too, not just safe." The wisdom of that statement, coming from someone who still believed in the tooth fairy and thought her teacher might be a vampire, hit Adrian square in the chest. "When did you get so smart?" he asked, voice rough. "I've always been smart. You just don't always listen." Adrian laughed despite everything. "Fair point." The next few days were tense but manageable. The gossip cycle did what Celeste predicted, moved on to some celebrity scandal that was flashier and more dramatic than a CEO dating a regular guy. The articles stayed online, and Adrian's inbox continued to fill with messages from distant acquaintances and former classmates, but the immediate frenzy died down. Celeste came to Eugene that Friday evening, looking exhausted and worried. Emma hugged her immediately, and Adrian watched some of the tension drain from Celeste's shoulders at the uncomplicated acceptance. After Emma went to bed, they sat on Adrian's couch in the quiet apartment, both of them processing the week. "I hate that this happened," Celeste said. "I hate that my life invaded yours without permission. It was bound to happen eventually." "That doesn't make it okay." Adrian took her hand, threading their fingers together. "No, but it's done, and we survived it. That's something." "I've been thinking." Celeste's voice was careful. "About what comes next. About what our life looks like if we're serious about this." "I'm listening." "I can't keep living in Portland and you in Eugene and us trying to cobble together weekends when our schedules align. It's not sustainable long term." She turned to face him fully. "So either I need to move here or you need to move there, or we need to find some third option that doesn't involve us being 90 minutes apart." Adrian's pulse kicked up. They'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks, both of them knowing it was coming, but neither ready to start it. "What do you want?" "I want to wake up next to you more than twice a month. I want to have dinner with you and Emma without it being a special occasion that requires schedule coordination. I want to stop feeling like I'm visiting your life instead of being part of it. So move here." Celeste laughed, surprised. "Just like that?" "Why not? You work remotely half the time anyway. Eugene has internet and coffee shops and everything else you need. And Emma and I are here, which seems like a pretty good reason." "Adrian, I can't just move to Eugene and disrupt your entire life." "You're not disrupting it. You're joining it. There's a difference." Celeste was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. "I'd need to keep an office in Portland for meetings, and I travel a lot for work." "I know. And I'd need more space than your one-bedroom apartment offers. This place is perfect for you and Emma, but adding me permanently would be cramped, so we find a bigger place. Together." The words felt enormous as Adrian said them, like he was proposing something far bigger than just shared rent. "If you want that, if that's not too fast." "It's absolutely too fast by any reasonable standard." Celeste smiled, eyes bright. "But nothing about us has been reasonable from the start. Why start now?" "Is that a yes?" "It's a, let me think about logistics and talk to my assistant about coordinating schedules and figure out how to make this actually work. But it's also a yes, I want to build a life with you and Emma if you're sure that's what you want." Adrian kissed her, pouring every ounce of certainty he felt into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, "I've never been more sure of anything." The next morning, Emma found them having coffee in the kitchen and immediately sensed something had shifted. "What happened?" she demanded. "What makes you think something happened?" Adrian asked. "You both look like you have a secret, a good secret." Celeste glanced at Adrian, who nodded. Celeste is thinking about moving to Eugene so we can spend more time together. Emma's eyes went wide. Really? Really? If that's okay with you. Are you moving into our apartment? We'd probably find a bigger place, so everyone has their own space. Emma processed this with the serious consideration she gave all major life decisions. Then, would I get my own room still? Absolutely, Celeste said, and you'd get final approval on where we live. This affects you as much as it affects us. Okay, Emma nodded decisively. Then yes, you can move here. Adrian laughed at the formal pronouncement. Thank you for your permission. You're welcome. Can we have pancakes now? Life shifted into a new rhythm after that. Celeste started spending more time in Eugene, working from Adrian's apartment when she could, driving back to Portland for meetings when necessary. They looked at houses and apartments, trying to find something that felt right for a blended family that didn't quite exist in any conventional sense. It wasn't smooth. There were arguments about space and boundaries and how to integrate their vastly different lives. Celeste worked 80-hour weeks sometimes, and Adrian struggled with feeling like he was always accommodating her schedule. Emma had moments of jealousy when Celeste took up attention that used to be exclusively hers. Mr. Whiskers expressed his displeasure at the disruption by knocking things off counters with increased frequency. But they worked through it. They learned each other's patterns and triggers and needs. They figured out how to fight productively instead of destructively. They built something new from the pieces of their separate lives, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. 2 months after the gossip article, they found a house. 3 bedrooms, small yard, in a quiet neighborhood near Emma's school. It needed work. The kitchen was outdated, the master bathroom had terrible tile, the fence was falling apart, but it had good bones and enough space for all of them. Adrian stood in the empty living room during their final walkthrough, trying to picture their furniture here, their lives here. What do you think? Celeste asked, coming to stand beside him. I think it's a lot of house for a tech support guy. Good thing you're not just a tech support guy anymore. Adrian had given his notice the week before. Celeste's company had an opening for someone to manage customer communication strategy, and she'd offered it to him with the caveat that he'd be reporting to someone else, not her directly, to avoid any conflict of interest. The salary was more than double what he'd been making. He'd accepted. I'm still getting used to that, Adrian admitted. You'll be great at it. You're already great at explaining complex things to people who don't understand them. This is just that with better pay and more interesting problems. What about you? He turned to face her. Are you sure you want this? The house in Eugene, the domestic life, the 7-year-old who will definitely have opinions about how you arrange the furniture. Celeste smiled. I've never been more sure of anything. This is what I've been missing without knowing it. Not the house specifically, but the life it represents. Coming home to people who care about me for who I am, not what I can do for them. Building something that matters beyond quarterly earnings and investor returns. It won't always be easy. Nothing worth having is. They bought the house, spent the next month painting and renovating and arguing good-naturedly about design choices. Emma picked out paint colors for her new room, purple, naturally, and insisted on helping with every project, her assistants more enthusiastic than useful. Celeste hired movers for her belongings from Portland, and Adrian was struck by how few personal items she actually owned. Most of her possessions were work-related or functional, the things that mattered to her. A few photos, her mother's jewelry, a collection of vintage cameras, fit in a single box. They moved in on a Saturday in early December, the weather cold and gray, but not raining for once. Jason and a few other friends helped carry furniture in boxes, and Emma directed traffic like a tiny general, telling everyone where things should go. That night, after Emma was asleep in her new purple room and the friends had left, and the house was quiet, except for the sound of Mr. Whiskers exploring his expanded territory, Adrian and Celeste sat on the floor of their bedroom, surrounded by unpacked boxes. We did it, Celeste said, leaning against his shoulder. We did. I moved to Eugene, Oregon, population 66,000, where I know almost no one except you and Emma and your judgmental cat. Having regrets? Not even a little. She turned to look at him. I thought leaving Portland would feel like giving something up, like I was sacrificing my life for yours. But it doesn't. It feels like I'm finally choosing myself instead of just choosing success. Adrian understood that completely. For years, he'd been choosing safety over happiness, responsibility over desire, the small, certain life over the riskier, fuller one. Meeting Celeste had forced him to reconsider those choices, to ask himself what he actually wanted instead of just what he could safely have. "I love you," he said, because it was the simplest truth he knew. "I love you too, both of you. This whole chaotic, imperfect life we're building." Christmas came 2 weeks later. Celeste had never really celebrated it properly. Her father had seen holidays as business opportunities. And after her mother died, they'd mostly just ignored them. But Emma had very specific ideas about how Christmas should look, involving excessive decorations and cookies and a tree that took up half their living room. They did it all. Decorated together, baked together, wrapped presents in paper that Mr. Whiskers immediately tried to destroy. On Christmas morning, Emma woke them at 6 a.m., bouncing with excitement, and they stumbled downstairs to find her already examining the presents under the tree. Adrian had gotten Celeste a vintage Leica camera she'd been eyeing online for months. She'd gotten him a new laptop for his schoolwork, refusing to let him use his ancient machine anymore. And together, they'd gotten Emma the telescope she'd been wanting, perfect for her aspirations toward paleontology, astronomy, veterinary medicine. But the best gift came later, after the wrapping paper was cleaned up and they were making breakfast together in their new kitchen. Emma was showing Celeste how to flip pancakes without making them into abstract shapes, both of them laughing when one landed on the floor. Adrian stood watching them, coffee in hand, and realized this was it. This was the thing he'd been missing without knowing what to call it. Not perfection, not some fantasy version of domestic bliss, but this messy, real, imperfect life with people who chose him and kept choosing him every single day. "Daddy, you're smiling at nothing again," Emma said. "Just happy, baby. Good. You should be happy." She turned back to Celeste. "Okay, now try flipping this one. Remember to use your wrist, not your whole arm." Celeste attempted the flip with intense concentration. The pancake rotated beautifully and landed perfectly in the pan. Emma cheered. Celeste looked absurdly proud of herself. "I did it," she said to Adrian. "You did. Very impressive. Next, I'll master scrambled eggs that don't somehow turn rubbery. One miracle at a time." Later that day, Karen came by to pick Emma up for her Christmas celebration. She stood in the doorway of the new house, taking in the decorations and the obvious signs of 3 people living together. "This is nice," she said, and sounded like she meant it. "Really nice." "Thanks." Adrian shifted uncomfortably, waiting for the criticism or concern he'd learned to expect. But Karen just smiled. "Emma seems happy, and you seem happy. That's what matters." It was the closest thing to a blessing he was going to get, and Adrian took it gratefully. As winter turned to spring, they settled into their life together. Celeste split her time between Eugene and Portland, gradually shifting more responsibilities to her new CEO, while she focused on the strategic direction she actually cared about. Adrian started his new job and discovered he was good at it, that years of patient problem-solving actually translated into valuable skills. Emma thrived with the expanded family, her confidence growing alongside her vocabulary and her increasingly elaborate theories about everything. There were still hard days. Days when Celeste traveled for a week and Adrian missed her so much it physically hurt. Days when Emma tested boundaries and pushed back against rules she didn't like. Days when the weight of building this new life felt overwhelming. But there were more good days than hard ones. Days when Adrian came home to find Celeste and Emma building elaborate Lego structures together. Days when he caught Celeste watching him with that soft expression that meant she was happy. Days when Emma told her friends that her family was Daddy and Celeste, and Mr. Whiskers said, with the same casual confidence she applied to everything else. 6 months after moving in together, Adrian and Celeste were cleaning up after dinner while Emma did homework at the table. The radio was playing quietly, and Celeste was humming along to some song Adrian didn't recognize. "Dance with me," she said suddenly. "What?" "Dance with me, like we did at the wedding. There's no room, and we're washing dishes. So, dance with me anyway." Adrian dried his hands and pulled her close, and they swayed together in their kitchen while Emma watched them with fond exasperation. "You guys are weird," she announced. "Probably," Adrian agreed. "But good weird," Emma clarified. "The best kind." Celeste laughed against his shoulder, and Adrian held her tighter, remembering the first time they danced together. How unlikely it had seemed, how impossible this future had felt. "Don't let go just yet," Celeste murmured. "Never planned to." And he didn't. Not when things got hard, not when their different worlds collided in uncomfortable ways, not when fear whispered that this was too good to last. He held on, and so did she, and so did Emma. And together they built something that looked nothing like the lives they'd planned, but everything like the lives they needed. Because that's what Adrian learned in those months of transformation, that love isn't about finding someone perfect or building a life without complications. It's about choosing someone imperfect and building a life worth the complications. It's about being seen, really seen, for who you are instead of who you're supposed to be. It's about making space for another person's chaos and letting them make space for yours. He'd spent so many years making himself smaller, quieter, less demanding of the world, playing it safe because the alternative felt too risky. But Celeste had walked into his carefully controlled life and refused to let him hide anymore. She'd seen his potential when he'd forgotten he had any. She'd chosen him when he'd stopped believing anyone would. And in doing so, she'd given him permission to choose himself too, to want more, to reach for more, to believe he deserved more than just survival. That summer, they got married in their backyard with 20 people present. Nothing fancy or formal, just the people who mattered. Emma was the flower girl and the ring bearer, insisting she could handle both responsibilities simultaneously. Mr. Whiskers watched from the window with his usual disdain for human sentimentality. Jason officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. The ceremony was short and sweet and slightly chaotic. When Emma dropped one of the rings, and they all had to search the grass for 5 minutes to find it. When Jason pronounced them married, Emma cheered louder than anyone, and Adrian kissed his wife, surrounded by the life they'd built together from nothing but honesty and hope and stubborn refusal to let fear win. Later, after the guests had left and Emma was asleep and they were alone in their bedroom, Celeste curled into Adrian's side and said, "I can't believe this is real." "Which part?" "All of it. You, Emma, this house, this life, that I get to have all of it. You deserve all of it. So do you." She propped herself up to look at him. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "That I've never felt invisible with you. Not once. From that first dance, you've always seen me. Not what I've accomplished or what I can offer, but actually me. And that's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." Adrian's throat went tight. "You did the same for me. Made me feel like I mattered beyond just being Emma's father or someone's employee. We saved each other a little bit, I think. More than a little bit." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Adrian's last thought before sleep claimed him was how extraordinary it was that his life had room for this now. That he'd expanded beyond survival into something richer and fuller and infinitely more complicated. 6 months later, Celeste told him she was pregnant. They hadn't been trying, hadn't really discussed it beyond vague someday conversations. But there she was, standing in their bathroom holding a positive pregnancy test, looking terrified and hopeful in equal measure. "Surprise?" she said weakly. Adrian crossed the small bathroom in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. "When?" "July, probably." "I know we didn't plan this. I know it's fast and we're still figuring out how to blend our existing family and Celeste." She stopped, looking up at him. "I love you and I want this. If you want this. I want this. I'm scared out of my mind, but I want this." Telling Emma was both easier and harder than expected. She processed the information with her characteristic seriousness, asked detailed questions about gestation periods and whether the baby would share her room, and then announced that she'd need to research the best techniques for being an older sister. "You're going to be amazing at it," Celeste told her. "I know, but it's important to do research anyway. That's what scientists do." Adrian watched his daughter and his wife discussing the logistics of expanding their family, and felt gratitude so profound it was almost painful. This life he had now, messy and complicated and nothing like he'd planned, was so much better than the small, safe existence he'd been settling for before. Their daughter was born in July, tiny and perfect and loud. They named her Lily, and Emma took her responsibilities as big sister with the same intense focus she applied to everything else. Celeste navigated new motherhood with the same strategic approach she brought to running companies, which resulted in detailed spreadsheets about feeding schedules and sleep patterns, but also genuine joy at the small discoveries. And Adrian, who'd once thought his capacity for love was maxed out by Emma, discovered he'd been wrong. His heart expanded to hold this new person too, along with Celeste and Emma, and even Mr. Whiskers in his cranky old age. Life wasn't perfect. Celeste still traveled for work, though less frequently. Adrian still struggled with imposter syndrome at his job. Emma still tested boundaries and pushed back against rules. Lily cried at 3 a.m. and refused to sleep through the night until she was nearly a year old. Money was tighter than it had been when it was just Celeste's income, because they'd chosen to build their life around time together rather than maximum earning potential. But it was real. It was theirs. And every morning, Adrian woke up next to Celeste in their house with their daughters asleep down the hall and thought about how close he'd come to missing all of this. Because if he'd said no to that wedding invitation, he never would have met her. If he'd been too scared to accept her invitation to dance, they never would have connected. If he'd let fear win any of the 1,000 times it tried to convince him this was too risky, too complicated, too impossible, he'd still be living that small, safe life. And sure, that life had been manageable, predictable, free of the complications that came with loving someone whose world was so different from his own. But it had also been lonely, limiting, a life of survival rather than living. This was better. This chaos and complication and constant negotiation was infinitely better than safety without joy, stability without growth, survival without love. Years later, when people asked how they made it work, a billionaire CEO and a former tech support guy, their blended family, their different backgrounds, Adrian always gave the same answer. They chose each other. Every single day, in 1,000 small ways, they chose each other. Chose honesty over comfort, growth over stagnation, love over fear. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magic solution that made everything easy. Just two imperfect people building an imperfect life together, refusing to give up when things got hard. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.